Welcome back to Sleep 2 RPG, where epic gaming lore meets peaceful rest. Tonight, we journey into the twisted realms of Oblivion to explore the most powerful and enigmatic beings in all of Elder Scrolls lore, the Daedric Princes. Over the next several hours, we'll uncover the dark secrets, ancient powers, and complex motivations of these 16 masters of chaos and order. So get comfortable, close your eyes, and let's begin this adventure into the depths of Oblivion itself. Before we delve into the individual princes, it's crucial to understand what the Daedra truly are. The word Daedra comes from the ancient Aldmeris, meaning not our ancestors, distinguishing them from the Aedra, or our ancestors, who sacrificed themselves to create the mortal world of Mundus. The Daedra, by contrast, chose to remain apart from creation, maintaining their full divine power while building their own realms within the void of Oblivion. Unlike the Aedra, who diminished themselves through creation, the Daedric Princes retained their primordial strength, becoming beings of such immense power that mortal minds can barely comprehend their true nature. They are not bound by the conventional concepts of good and evil that mortals understand, instead operating according to their own alien logic and spheres of influence. Each prince embodies a particular aspect of existence, whether it be knowledge, madness, domination, or decay, and rules over their own plane of oblivion that reflects their essential nature. The relationship between mortals and Daedra has always been complex and fraught with danger. While some princes genuinely care for their followers, others view mortals as nothing more than amusing playthings or tools to be used and discarded. Many cultures across Tamriel have worshipped these beings throughout history, building shrines and conducting rituals to gain their favor, often at great personal cost. What makes the Daedric Princes particularly fascinating is their immortality and the cyclical nature of their existence. Unlike mortals who die and move on to whatever afterlife awaits them, the Daedra are eternal. When their physical forms are destroyed, they simply reform in their home planes, carrying with them the memories and experiences of countless eons. This eternal existence has shaped their perspectives in ways that mortals cannot fully grasp, leading to actions that may seem incomprehensible or cruel, but follow their own twisted logic. Azura, the Dusk and Dawn. Let us begin our journey with Azura, known as the Queen of Dusk and Dawn, the Twilight's patron and the Rose of Twilight. Among all the Daedric Princes, Azura stands as perhaps the most beloved by mortals, particularly among the Dunmer people of Morrowind, who revere her as one of their good Daedra alongside Boethia and Mephala. Azura's sphere encompasses the liminal moments of transition, dawn and dusk, the times when day becomes night and night becomes day. She is the patron of prophecy and fate, guiding mortals through the uncertain passages of their lives. Her realm, Moonshadow, is said to be a place of such ethereal beauty that mortals who behold it are left half blind, unable to fully process the perfection they have witnessed. The prince appears most commonly as a woman of extraordinary beauty, her skin shifting between the deep blue of twilight and the pale rose of dawn. She is often depicted with a star upon her brow, symbolizing her connection to the celestial movements that mark the passage of time. Unlike many of her fellow princes, Azura genuinely cares for her mortal followers, though her love comes with its own burdens. Azura's relationship with the Chimera people, who would later become the Dunmer, exemplifies both her protective nature and her capacity for terrible vengeance. When the Tribunal, Vivek, Almalexia, and Sotha Sil used the tools of Kagrenak to achieve godhood, by tapping into the heart of Lorcan, they broke their oath to Azura and usurped the worship that rightfully belonged to her and her fellow good Daedra. The prince's response was swift and devastating. In her fury, Azura cursed the entire Chimera race, transforming their golden skin to ash grey and their eyes to burning red, creating the Dunmer as they are known today. This act of divine retribution demonstrates that even among the more benevolent princes, crossing a Daedric lord comes with consequences that can echo through generations. Yet Azura's anger was not merely petty vengeance. The tribunal's actions had upset the natural order, and their stolen divinity was fundamentally unstable. Through her agent, the Nerevarine, Azura worked to restore the proper balance, guiding the hero through the complex political and spiritual landscape of Morrowind to ultimately fulfill the prophecies she had set in motion centuries before. The tale of the Nerevarine perfectly illustrates Azura's approach to mortal affairs. Rather than intervening directly, she plants seeds of prophecy and guides chosen individuals along paths that will eventually achieve her goals. Her prophecies are rarely straightforward. They come wrapped in riddles and metaphors that only become clear in hindsight, reflecting her dominion over the uncertain transitions between one state and another. Azura's artifacts reflect her dual nature and her role as a guide through darkness. Azura's star, a soul gem of infinite capacity, represents her connection to the eternal cycles of death and rebirth. The twilight star that bears her name appears at dawn and dusk, low on the horizon below the constellation of the Steed, serving as a celestial marker of her influence over these transitional moments. In her dealings with mortals, Azura has shown both remarkable patience and sudden, terrible wrath. She has been known to ally herself with other princes when it serves her purposes. Historical records suggest she once worked alongside Molag Bal, despite their fundamental differences in nature. This pragmatic approach to alliances demonstrates the complex political landscape of Oblivion, where even seemingly opposed forces may find common cause. The worship of Azura has persisted across multiple eras and cultures. The ancient Khajiit knew her as one of their most important deities, and her influence can be traced through various religious traditions across Tamriel. Her summoning day falls on the 21st of First Seed, during the festival of Hogatham, when the barriers between her realm and Mundus grow thin. What sets Azura apart from many other Daedric princes is her genuine emotional investment in her followers. Where other princes might see mortals as disposable pawns, Azura forms deep, lasting connections with those who serve her faithfully. This emotional engagement is both her strength and her weakness. It drives her to great acts of protection and guidance, but also makes her capable of devastating retribution when that trust is betrayed. The prince's influence extends beyond mere mortal affairs into the very fabric of fate itself. As a patron of prophecy, Azura can perceive the threads of possibility that stretch into the future, though even she cannot see all outcomes clearly. Her prophecies often come true through the actions of those who try to prevent them, reflecting the paradoxical nature of fate in the Elder Scrolls universe. In the modern era, Azura continues to play an active role in mortal affairs. During the events of the Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, she guides the Dragonborn to cleanse her artifact of the corruption placed upon it by a misguided follower. Even in this relatively simple quest, her concern for both her artifact and her followers shines through, demonstrating that despite her divine nature, she has not lost touch with the mortals who revere her. Boethia, the Prince of Plots. From the twilight realm of Azura, we turn to a far darker figure, Boethia, known by many names, the Prince of Plots, the Daedric Prince of Conspiracy and Deceit, the Dark Warrior, and to the Khajiit, Berthra. Where Azura guides and protects, Boethia destroys and transforms, embodying the principle that sometimes the old must be swept away for the new to emerge. Boethia's sphere encompasses murder, assassination, treason, and the unlawful overthrow of authority. This may seem purely destructive, but Boethia's philosophy runs deeper than mere chaos. The prince believes that strength and wisdom can only be proven through conflict, that the weak deserve to fall, and that true power must be seized rather than inherited. In this way, Boethiah serves as a cosmic force of change, ensuring that no institution or individual becomes too comfortable in their position. The prince's appearance reflects this philosophy of conflict and transformation. Boethiah typically manifests as a figure of terrible beauty, appearing sometimes as male and sometimes as female, often shifting between forms to suit the needs of the moment. When depicted as the Dark Warrior, Boethiah appears as an armored figure, wreathed in shadow, carrying weapons that gleam with an otherworldly light. The prince's true form, however, is said to be even more terrible. A being of such predatory grace that mortals who look upon it directly are filled with an overwhelming desire to either worship or destroy everything around them. Boethiah's relationship with mortals is fundamentally different from Azura's protective guidance. Where Azura seeks to shelter her followers from harm, Boethiah actively places them in danger, believing that only through trial by fire can true strength be achieved. The prince's followers are encouraged to prove their worth through acts of rebellion, assassination, and conquest. This is not senseless violence, but rather a cosmic test. Those who succeed prove their worthiness to serve a prince of plots, while those who fail were never truly strong enough to deserve Boethiah's attention. The most famous example of Boethiah's transformative power lies in the ancient myth of Trinimac and the creation of the Orcish people. Trinimac was a powerful Daedric deity, the strongest of the Etada who served Ariel. He was beloved by the Altmer and represented the pinnacle of elven strength and virtue. But Boethiah saw in Trinimac's righteousness a dangerous stagnation, a force that would prevent necessary change and growth. In one of the most significant events in Tamrielic history, Boethiah consumed Trinimac entirely, body and soul. This was not merely murder, but a fundamental transformation. The consumption changed both beings. Trinimac was reborn as Malakath, the Daedric Prince of the spurned and ostracized, while those who had followed Trinimac became the Orchymer, the Orcs. This myth illustrates Boethiah's role as an agent of cosmic change, willing to destroy even the most powerful beings if their existence prevents necessary evolution. Boethiah's relationship with the Chimer people, who would later become the Dunmer, showcases another aspect of the prince's complex nature. Along with Azura and Mephala, Boethiah was revered as one of the good Daedra, though this designation might seem strange given the prince's sphere of assassination and treachery. The key lies in understanding that the Chimer were a people in rebellion. They had rejected the Altmeri pantheon and sought to forge their own destiny in a new land. Boethiah's teachings of righteous rebellion and the overthrow of corrupt authority resonated deeply with their struggles. The prince taught the Chimer that strength must be proven, that authority must be earned rather than inherited, and that sometimes the only way to achieve justice is through the blade. These lessons served them well in their conflicts with the Dwemer, the Nords, and various other threats they faced in their new homeland. Boethiah's influence can be seen in the warrior culture that developed among the Dunmer, where personal combat prowess was highly valued and political power was often decided through trials by combat. One of Boethiah's most terrifying aspects is the prince's ability to inspire absolute loyalty, even while encouraging betrayal. Followers of Boethiah are taught that loyalty to the prince supersedes all other bonds: family, friendship, love, even loyalty to other Daedric princes. This creates a paradox, where Boethiah's most faithful servants are also the most likely to betray anyone else in their lives. The prince delights in these contradictions, seeing them as proof of the complex nature of true strength. The tournament held at Boethiah's shrine exemplifies this philosophy. Here, the prince's followers engage in ritual combat, often to the death, competing for the honor of becoming Boethiah's champion. The winner is not necessarily the strongest or most skilled fighter, but the one who best embodies Boethiah's principles of cunning, ruthlessness, and the will to do whatever is necessary to achieve victory. These tournaments serve multiple purposes. They provide entertainment for the prince, cull the weak from among the followers, and identify those worthy of greater power. Boethiah's artifacts reflect the prince's nature as a master of conflict and deception. The ebony mail, a suit of armor that poisons enemies who come too close, represents the prince's preference for indirect methods of combat. It allows the wearer to eliminate foes without direct confrontation, embodying the principle that victory matters more than honor. Other artifacts attributed to Boethiah include various weapons and items that enhance the user's ability to succeed through cunning and treachery rather than brute force. The prince's realm, known as Attribution's Share or the Tournament Eternal, reflects Boethiah's obsession with conflict and testing. It is described as a realm of perpetual war, where armies clash endlessly, and individual warriors engage in single combat that may last for centuries. Yet this is not mindless violence. Every battle serves a purpose. Every conflict tests some aspect of the participant's character or skill. Those who prove themselves in these eternal wars may find themselves elevated to positions of greater responsibility within Boethiah's hierarchy. Boethiah's relationship with other Daedric princes is complex and often hostile. The prince's sphere of unlawful overthrow naturally puts Boethiah at odds with those who represent order and authority, particularly Jiggalag. However, the prince has also come into conflict with fellow chaotic Daedra like Molag Bal, suggesting that their rivalry goes beyond simple philosophical differences to something more personal and fundamental. The cult of Boethiah has persisted throughout Tamrielic history, though its worship has often been driven underground by more conventional religious authorities. Followers gather in secret to perform the ritual of truth, where they share their deepest secrets and plot against their enemies. These gatherings are dangerous affairs. The participants never know if one among them might be secretly serving a rival, ready to betray the others for personal gain. Yet this constant danger is part of Boethiah's appeal, as it ensures that only the truly committed and capable survive to serve the prince. In more recent times, Boethiah's influence can be seen in various revolutionary movements and political upheavals throughout Tamriel. While the prince rarely intervenes directly, the seeds of rebellion and the desire to overthrow corrupt authority often bear the mark of Boethiah's influence. This indirect approach allows the prince to shape events across vast spans of time and geography without revealing the full extent of their involvement. Clavicus Vile, the Prince of Bargains. Moving from the battlefield politics of Boethiah, we encounter a very different kind of manipulator. Clavicus Vile, the Prince of Bargains wishes and power through deals. If Boethiah represents change through violent upheaval, Clavicus Vile embodies transformation through negotiation, contract, and the careful manipulation of desire. Clavicus Vile appears as a small, impish figure with horns, often described as diminutive compared to other Daedric princes. This relatively modest appearance is deceptive. The prince's true power lies not in physical might, but in a supernatural understanding of mortal psychology and desire. Clavicus Vile can identify what any being wants most and craft a bargain that seems to offer exactly that, while containing hidden clauses and interpretations that ultimately serve the prince's own interests. What makes Clavicus Vile particularly fascinating among the Daedric princes is the presence of Barbas, the prince's external conscience in the form of a talking dog. This relationship is unique in Daedric lore. No other prince is known to have externalized a portion of their personality in such a way. Barbas serves as a moderating influence on Clavicus Vile's more destructive impulses, often advising mortals against making deals with his master, or warning them about the hidden dangers in seemingly beneficial contracts. The relationship between Clavicus Vile and Barbas reveals something crucial about the prince's nature. While most Daedric princes embrace their essential characteristics completely, Clavicus Vile appears to be fundamentally conflicted about his own sphere of influence. Part of him delights in the clever wordplay and psychological manipulation required to craft the perfect deal, while another part, represented by Barbas, recognizes the harm these bargains often cause to mortals who don't fully understand what they're agreeing to. This internal conflict manifests in the structure of the prince's realm, the Fields of Regret. Unlike the harsh, obviously dangerous plains ruled by princes like Mehrunes Dagon or Molag Bal, the Fields of Regret appear as a peaceful countryside, dotted with beautiful glass cities and floating stone spirals. The landscape itself reflects the nature of Clavicus Vile's bargains, superficially attractive and peaceful, but ultimately hollow and unsatisfying for those who find themselves trapped there. The history of Clavicus Vile's interactions with mortals is filled with cautionary tales about the dangers of getting exactly what you ask for. The prince specializes in literal interpretations of requests that technically fulfill the letter of an agreement while completely subverting its spirit. A warrior seeking strength might find himself transformed into a mindless beast of incredible power. A scholar seeking knowledge might discover that the information he gains drives him to madness. A lover seeking to win someone's heart might find that their beloved's affection comes at the cost of their own ability to feel love in return. One of the most famous examples of Clavicus Vile's bargaining prowess involves the legendary warrior Cyrus and his sister. When Cyrus sought to rescue his sister from captivity, Clavicus Vile offered him a seemingly simple game of chance. If Cyrus won, his sister would be freed, but if he lost, his soul would belong to the prince. The game itself appeared fair, but Clavicus Vile had structured the rules in such a way that victory was nearly impossible. Only through exceptional cleverness and a willingness to accept significant personal sacrifice was Cyrus able to secure his sister's freedom, and even then, the victory came at a cost that would haunt him for the rest of his life. This story illustrates several key aspects of Clavicus Vile's character. The prince genuinely honors his agreements. When Cyrus won according to the rules they had established, the sister was indeed freed. However, the prince also ensures that even victory in his games comes with unexpected consequences. This isn't necessarily malice in the conventional sense, but rather reflects Clavicus Vile's belief that true power requires sacrifice, and that mortals, who aren't willing to pay the full price for their desires, don't truly deserve to have them fulfilled. The prince's artifacts reflect this philosophy of power through negotiation. The mask of Clavicus Vile enhances the wearer's ability to negotiate and persuade others, effectively allowing them to become better at the kind of bargaining that Clavicus Vile himself excels at. However, the mask also influences the wearer's personality, making them more like the prince, clever and charming, but also increasingly willing to manipulate others for personal gain. The Umbra Sword represents another aspect of Clavicus Vile's domain: the unintended consequences of bargains made hastily or without full consideration of their implications. This sentient weapon hungers for souls and will eventually attempt to possess anyone who wields it for too long. The sword was created through a bargain gone wrong, where the original wielder sought a weapon of ultimate power without considering that such power might come with its own agenda. Clavicus Vile's worship among mortals tends to be more individual and secretive than the organized cults that serve other Daedric princes. People typically turn to Clavicus Vile when they find themselves in desperate situations where conventional solutions have failed. The prince's followers include everyone from struggling merchants seeking profitable deals to ambitious nobles attempting to outmaneuver their rivals through clever contracts and political arrangements. The summoning of Clavicus Vile requires specific rituals and offerings, but the prince is generally more accessible than many of his peers. This accessibility is itself part of the trap. Clavicus Vile wants mortals to be able to reach him when they're desperate enough to accept unfavorable terms. The prince's summoning day falls during specific celestial configurations, but experienced cultists know that he can often be contacted during times of personal or political crisis, when the barriers between planes thin under the pressure of mortal desperation. In his interactions with other Daedric princes, Clavicus Vile represents a more subtle form of power than the direct confrontation favoured by princes like Mehrunes Dagon, or the mind-bending madness of Sheogorath. The prince prefers to work through intermediaries and long-term plans, setting up situations where his rivals will eventually find themselves in need of his particular services. This patient approach has allowed Clavicus Vile to maintain influence across multiple eras and political upheavals, adapting his methods to changing circumstances, while always maintaining his essential nature as the master of the mutually beneficial, yet ultimately harmful bargain. The prince's relationship with the concept of free will is particularly complex. Unlike princes who simply impose their will on mortals through force or manipulation, Clavicus Vile requires his victims to choose their own fate. Every bargain is entered into voluntarily, with both parties fully aware that they are making a deal with a Daedric prince. The fact that mortals consistently underestimate the true cost of these bargains reflects not the prince's deception, but rather the fundamental human tendency to believe that we are smarter than we actually are, and that we can somehow outsmart beings who have been perfecting their craft for millennia. Hermaeus Mora, the demon of knowledge. From the realm of bargains and wishes, we descend into the ink-black waters of forbidden knowledge, where Hermaeus Mora holds dominion over all that is known and unknown. The demon of knowledge, the keeper of forbidden secrets, Herma Mora to the Nords. This prince embodies humanity's eternal struggle between the desire to know and the wisdom to understand that some knowledge comes at too high a price. Hermaeus Mora appears as a writhing mass of tentacles, eyes and claws, a form so alien that mortal minds struggle to process it fully. The prince's appearance shifts constantly, with tentacles extending into impossible geometries and eyes opening and closing in patterns that follow no earthly logic. This ever-changing form reflects the nature of knowledge itself, vast, interconnected, and impossible to grasp in its entirety. The prince's realm, Apocrypha, stands as one of the most distinctive and terrifying planes in all of Oblivion. It appears as an infinite library, with towers of books stretching impossibly high into a green-tinged sky. The floors are pools of black, oily water through which tentacles occasionally break the surface, and the air itself seems thick with the weight of accumulated knowledge. Seekers and lurkers, Hermaeus Mora's Daedric servants, patrol the endless corridors, protecting the books from those who would seek knowledge without paying the appropriate price. What sets Hermaeus Mora apart from other Daedric princes is the fundamental nature of his sphere. While other princes rule over aspects of existence that can be approached in multiple ways, one can find strength through many paths or achieve power through various means. Knowledge is singular and objective. A fact is either true or false, regardless of who believes it or how it makes them feel. This gives Hermaeus Mora a unique position among the princes, as he possesses something that even his peers may need: information. The prince's relationship with mortals is built on this fundamental asymmetry. Every mortal possesses some knowledge that Hermaeus Mora desires: memories of experiences, observations about the world, insights gleaned through study or contemplation. In exchange, the prince offers access to secrets that mortals could never discover on their own. However, the knowledge that Hermaeus Mora trades is often dangerous, forbidden for good reason, or comes with understanding that fundamentally changes the recipient in ways they didn't anticipate. One of the most significant aspects of Hermaeus Mora's character is his role as an Daedra, a title suggesting that he predates most other Daedric princes, and possibly even the distinction between Aedra and Daedra. Some texts describe him as elder than Ada, placing his origins in the earliest moments of the universe's existence. This ancient nature gives Hermaeus Mora access to knowledge that spans the entire history of existence, including secrets about the fundamental nature of reality that other beings cannot comprehend. The prince's most famous artifact, the Ogma Infinium, embodies both the promise and the peril of Hermaeus Mora's gifts. This tome, written by the sage Xerxes, contains knowledge of the ages and can instantly grant its reader vast improvements in their skills and abilities. However, the book can only be read once by any individual, and the knowledge it imparts often comes with psychological changes that reflect the dangerous nature of the secrets contained within. Many who have read the Ogma Infinium report feeling fundamentally altered by the experience, as if they have learned things about reality that cannot be unlearned. The story of Miraak, the first Dragonborn, illustrates the seductive danger of serving Hermaeus Mora. Miraak sought the prince's knowledge to increase his power and eventually challenge the dragons themselves. Hermaeus Mora provided this knowledge willingly, but the price was Miraak's eternal servitude. For thousands of years, Miraak remained trapped in Apocrypha, his power growing, but his freedom lost. When he finally attempted to escape during the events of the Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, Hermaeus Mora manipulated events to replace him with the last Dragonborn, demonstrating the prince's long-term approach to managing his servants. This story reveals several crucial aspects of Hermaeus Mora's character. The prince is patient beyond mortal understanding, willing to wait millennia for plans to come to fruition. He also views knowledge as a form of currency that must be carefully managed. Sharing too much with any one individual might upset the balance that keeps him supreme in his domain. Most importantly, Hermaeus Mora understands that the most effective way to control someone is to give them exactly what they want, then make them dependent on continued access to that resource. The prince's relationship with the Skal people of Solstheim provides another perspective on his character. The Skal possessed ancient oral traditions that contained secrets about the nature of creation itself. Rather than simply taking this knowledge by force, Hermaeus Mora orchestrated a complex series of events that would ultimately pressure the Skal into sharing their secrets voluntarily. This patient approach reflects the prince's understanding that knowledge freely given is more valuable than knowledge taken by force, as it comes with the context and understanding necessary to make full use of it. Hermaeus Mora's influence extends beyond individual bargains to the very nature of learning and discovery itself. Scholars who delve too deeply into forbidden subjects often find themselves experiencing strange dreams and visions, receiving insights that they cannot remember seeking. These experiences can lead to brilliant discoveries or dangerous obsessions, depending on the individual's ability to handle the knowledge they receive. The prince seems to view this as a natural process. Those who can handle dangerous knowledge prove themselves worthy of more, while those who cannot serve as cautionary tales for others. The black books scattered throughout Tamriel serve as conduits for Hermaeus Mora's influence in the mortal world. These tomes transport readers directly to Apocrypha, where they can gain powerful abilities and insights in exchange for navigating the prince's twisted library. Each black book presents different challenges and offers different rewards, reflecting Hermaeus Mora's understanding that different individuals are motivated by different forms of knowledge. The prince's worship among mortals tends to attract scholars, mages, and others whose pursuit of knowledge has led them to places where conventional learning is insufficient. These followers often begin with innocent scholarly interests, a desire to understand the nature of magic, or to uncover the truth about historical events. However, Hermaeus Mora's knowledge is addictive, and many who begin as casual seekers of truth end up as obsessed cultists, willing to sacrifice everything for access to the prince's forbidden secrets. Unlike many other Daedric princes, Hermaeus Mora rarely demands conventional worship or tribute. Instead, he feeds on the act of learning itself, growing stronger each time someone discovers a new fact or gains a deeper understanding of existing knowledge. This makes him simultaneously one of the most benevolent and most dangerous of the princes. His influence encourages the advancement of learning and understanding, but also leads mortals into areas of knowledge that they are not equipped to handle safely. The prince's relationship with other Daedric princes is complex and often involves the exchange of information. Even beings as powerful as Daedric princes sometimes need knowledge that only Hermaeus Mora possesses, giving him significant leverage in interplanar politics. However, the prince rarely uses this leverage for direct conquest or domination, preferring to maintain his position as the keeper of secrets that others need but cannot obtain elsewhere. In recent events, Hermaeus Mora's involvement in the return of Athelia, the Prince of Paths, demonstrates his willingness to take extreme measures to preserve the stability of reality itself. When Athelia's power to alter fate threatened the fundamental structure of existence, Hermaeus Mora worked with other princes to erase all memory of her from reality. This action reveals that even the demon of knowledge recognizes that some secrets are too dangerous to be known, and that his ultimate loyalty is to the preservation of existence itself rather than the unlimited expansion of knowledge. Hircine, the huntsman of mortals. From the twisted libraries of Apocrypha, we emerge into the primal wilderness of the hunting grounds, domain of Hircine, the huntsman, the father of man-beasts, and the Daedric prince whose sphere encompasses the hunt, the chase, and the eternal struggle between predator and prey. Where Hermaeus Mora represents the cerebral pursuit of knowledge, Hircine embodies the raw physical aspects of existence, the primal instincts that drive all living creatures to survive, compete, and prove their worth through direct confrontation. Hircine appears as a tall, powerfully built man whose head is completely obscured by the skull of a great stag, complete with magnificent antlers that crown his form like a natural crown. This appearance is no mere affectation. The stag skull represents the prince's connection to the wild, untamed aspects of nature that exist beyond civilization's reach. When Hircine manifests in his full glory, he embodies the perfect fusion of human intelligence and animal instinct, creating a being that understands both the subtle strategies of civilized warfare and the direct, honest brutality of natural selection. The prince's realm, the hunting grounds, exists as an infinite forest where an eternal hunt plays out across landscapes that shift and change according to the needs of each particular chase. Here, the greatest hunters from across the various planes of existence pursue prey that ranges from magnificent beasts to fallen heroes who have proven themselves worthy of becoming the quarry in these ultimate tests of skill. The hunting grounds operate according to a perfect meritocracy. Strength, cunning, endurance, and adaptability determine one's position in the eternal hierarchy of hunter and hunted. What makes Hircine unique among the Daedric princes is his commitment to fairness and sporting conduct. While other princes often stack the odds in their favor or manipulate circumstances to ensure their desired outcomes, Hircine insists on genuine competition where victory must be earned through superior skill and determination. When the prince designates a mortal as prey for his great hunts, that individual is always given a genuine chance to escape or even turn the tables on their pursuers. This commitment to fair play reflects Hircine's belief that true strength can only be proven through honest competition. The prince's greatest gift to mortals is also his most dangerous, the curse of lycanthropy. Hircine created the various forms of were-creatures that stalk the Knights of Tamriel, transforming ordinary mortals into beings that embody the perfect fusion of human intelligence and animal savagery. Werewolves, werebears, werebores, and other lycanthropes all trace their lineage back to Hircine's desire to create mortals who could participate more fully in the eternal hunt. However, lycanthropy is far from an unmitigated blessing, where creatures must struggle constantly with their dual nature, fighting to maintain their humanity while embracing the beast within. The transformation grants incredible physical prowess, enhanced senses, and supernatural resilience, but it also brings an insatiable hunger for violence and the constant risk of losing oneself entirely to the animal instincts. This internal struggle reflects Hircine's philosophy that true strength requires balance, the ability to harness primal power without being destroyed by it. The Blood Moon prophecy, which played out on the island of Solstheim, demonstrates Hircine's approach to large-scale intervention in mortal affairs. Rather than simply appearing and demanding worship or conquest, the prince orchestrated a complex series of events that would test multiple individuals simultaneously. The prophecy involved werewolves, ancient Nordic burial sites, and a series of supernatural phenomena that ultimately culminated in a direct confrontation between the Nerevarine and Hircine himself. What makes this confrontation particularly interesting is that Hircine chose to face the Nerevarine through a series of increasingly challenging avatars rather than manifesting in his full power. First came the aspect of strength in the form of a great bear, then the aspect of speed as a magnificent elk, and finally the aspect of guile as Hircine himself. This progression reflects the prince's understanding that a truly worthy hunt requires escalating challenges, each testing different aspects of the prey's capabilities. The prince's relationship with his followers differs significantly from the worship patterns seen with other Daedric princes. Hircine's devotees don't gather in temples or perform elaborate rituals. Instead, they prove their faith through action, participating in hunts that test their skills against increasingly dangerous prey. The prince values deeds over words, preferring followers who demonstrate their devotion through their prowess in the field rather than through prayers or offerings. This practical approach to worship has made Hircine particularly popular among the more martial cultures of Tamriel. The Nords, with their warrior traditions and harsh climate, have long honored the huntsman. Many Nordic hunting lodges maintain shrines to Hircine, where successful hunters leave trophies from their greatest kills. The Bosmer of Valenwood, despite their generally peaceful nature, recognize Hircine as the patron of the wild hunt, their most sacred and terrifying ritual. The prince's artifacts reflect his domain over the hunt and the transformation between civilized and wild states. The savior's hide, a cuirass made from the skin of a great werewolf, provides protection while enhancing the wearer's connection to their primal instincts. Hircine's ring allows mortals to control their lycanthropic transformations, representing the prince's belief that true strength comes from mastering one's dual nature, rather than being controlled by it. The Spear of Bitter Mercy appears in various forms throughout history, always as a weapon perfectly suited to the hunt, capable of bringing down even supernatural prey. What sets Hircine apart from princes who view mortals as pawns or playthings is his genuine respect for worthy adversaries. The prince has been known to spare particularly impressive prey, not out of mercy, but out of admiration for their skills. Some of the greatest hunters in the hunting grounds began as Hircine's quarry, earning their place among the eternal predators through their ability to survive, or even wound the prince during their pursuit. This respect extends to Hircine's treatment of lycanthropes who manage to overcome their curse. Rather than punishing those who reject his gift, the prince often views their struggle as another form of hunt, the internal battle between human and beast. Those who successfully master their lycanthropy without losing their humanity earn Hircine's particular admiration, as they have proven capable of the most difficult hunt of all, the conquest of one's own nature. The prince's involvement in the events surrounding the companions in Skyrim demonstrates his complex relationship with lycanthropic warriors. The Circle, the inner membership of the companions, had been blessed with lycanthropy for generations, but some members began to view it as a curse rather than a gift. Hircine's response to their desire for release reveals another aspect of his character. While he values the hunt above all else, he also respects the right of worthy individuals to choose their own fate. Hircine's relationship with other Daedric princes is generally more straightforward than the complex political maneuvering that characterizes interactions between princes, like Clavicus Vile and Hermaeus Mora. The huntsman prefers direct confrontation to subtle manipulation, and his sphere rarely overlaps with those of his peers in ways that create ongoing conflicts. However, he has been known to come into conflict with princes whose domains oppose the natural order he represents. Meridia's hatred of undeath, for example, aligns with Hircine's preference for living, breathing prey over shambling corpses. The prince's influence on the natural world extends beyond his lycanthropic creations to the fundamental balance between predator and prey that governs all ecosystems. Hunters who honor Hircine often find that their prey becomes more challenging and rewarding, as if the animals themselves are inspired to greater cunning by the prince's presence. Conversely, those who hunt dishonorably, using unfair advantages, killing for sport rather than need, or showing no respect for their prey, may find themselves becoming the hunted, as Hircine's justice manifests through the very creatures they have wronged. The Great Hunt, Hircine's periodic intervention in mortal affairs, represents the prince's belief that civilization makes mortals weak and complacent. Every few centuries, he releases specially created creatures into the mortal world, forcing entire populations to remember what it means to be prey. These events serve multiple purposes. They cull the weak, strengthen the survivors, and remind mortals that no matter how advanced their societies become, they remain part of the natural world, where only the strong survive. Jyggalag, the Prince of Order. From the wild freedom of the hunt, we turn to examine perhaps the most tragic and complex figure among all the Daedric princes, Jyggalag, the Prince of Perfect Order, whose very existence challenges our understanding of the nature of chaos and law in the Elder Scrolls universe. Once the most powerful of all Daedric princes, Jyggalag's story is one of cosmic betrayal, enforced madness, and the ultimate triumph of order over the chaos that sought to contain it. Jyggalag represents absolute mathematical order, not the flexible structure that mortal societies require to function, but perfect, crystalline organization where every element has its predetermined place and deviation from the pattern is impossible. The prince appears as a towering figure of geometric perfection, his form composed of crystal and metal arranged in patterns that follow precise mathematical principles. Unlike other Daedric princes whose appearances might shift or change according to their mood or the needs of the moment, Jyggalag's form is constant, eternal, and utterly predictable. The prince's realm, known as the Ever-Gloaming, or the Perfect Realm, exists as a monument to absolute order. Here, every crystal formation, every architectural element, every path and passage follows logical principles that can be calculated and predicted. There is no randomness, no chaos, no element left to chance or personal preference. The realm's beauty lies in its perfect symmetry and mathematical precision, creating structures that are simultaneously alien and somehow familiar to any mind capable of understanding geometric principles. What made Jyggalag so threatening to the other Daedric princes was not merely his power, but the nature of that power. While other princes represent various forms of change, passion, and unpredictability, Jyggalag embodied the principle that all existence could be reduced to predictable patterns and mathematical certainties. His influence grew steadily across the realms of Oblivion, bringing order to chaotic regions and imposing systematic organization on domains that had previously existed in states of creative turmoil. The other Daedric princes eventually realized that Jiggalag's vision of perfect order posed an existential threat to their very nature. If the Prince of Order succeeded in his implicit goal of organizing all existence according to mathematical principles, there would be no room for the creative chaos, passionate excess, and unpredictable change that defined the other princes' spheres of influence. In what represents the most significant collective action in Daedric history, the other princes united to curse Jiggalag with their combined power. The curse they created was as elegant as it was cruel. Jiggalag would be transformed into his exact opposite, becoming Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. Every aspect of perfect order that defined Jiggalag's existence was inverted into random chaos. Mathematical precision became unpredictable whimsy, and eternal stability transformed into constant change. The curse was designed to be cyclical. At the end of each cosmic era, Jiggalag would briefly return to his true form, only to witness the destruction of everything he had built before being forced back into the role of Sheogorath. This cyclical punishment, known as the Grey March, represents one of the most sophisticated forms of cosmic justice ever devised. Jiggalag would experience brief moments of his true nature, long enough to appreciate what he had lost, and to begin the work of restoring order to his realm, only to have that progress destroyed when the curse reasserted itself. The psychological torture of this arrangement was perfectly calculated to cause maximum suffering, while ensuring that Jiggalag's threat to the established order remained neutralized. The Grey March itself was a terrifying spectacle that played out in the Shivering Isles, the realm that had once been Jiggalag's perfect domain. As the end of each era approached, the chaotic madness that characterized Sheogorath's realm would begin to crystallize and organize itself. The random, colorful landscapes of mania and dementia would transform into geometric precision, their inhabitants either fleeing or being transformed into the perfect, crystalline servants known as the Knights of Order. These knights represent Jiggalag's aesthetic perfectly, beings of geometric crystal who function as extensions of the prince's will, operating according to precise mathematical principles rather than individual personality or desire. They advance across the realm in perfect formation, transforming chaos into order through their very presence. Their advance is as inevitable as a mathematical proof, and their success as certain as gravity. The breaking of Jiggalag's curse during the events of the Elder Scrolls IV. Shivering Isles represents one of the most significant cosmic events in Elder Scrolls history. When the hero of Kvatch mantled the role of Sheogorath and successfully defended the realm against the Grey March, they disrupted the cycle that had contained Jiggalag for millennia. For the first time since the original curse was cast, Jiggalag emerged from the Grey March and remained in his true form, free to pursue his vision of perfect order. However, this freedom came at a significant cost. Jiggalag no longer possessed a realm of his own, having lost the Shivering Isles to the new Sheogorath. The prince found himself in the position of being one of the most powerful Daedric princes, while simultaneously being homeless, forced to wander the realms of Oblivion in search of new domains to organize. This situation creates fascinating possibilities for future cosmic conflicts, as Jiggalag may attempt to impose order on realms belonging to other princes. The philosophical implications of Jiggalag's existence challenge many fundamental assumptions about the nature of the Elder Scrolls universe. His vision of perfect order suggests that chaos and change, which most inhabitants of Tamriel view as fundamental aspects of existence, may actually be temporary aberrations that can be corrected through sufficient application of organizing principles. This perspective positions Jiggalag not as a villain, but as a cosmic force working toward what he perceives as the universe's ultimate destiny. The prince's relationship with mortals is radically different from that of other Daedric princes. Where most princes seek worship, entertainment, or the satisfaction of their particular desires through interaction with mortals, Jyggalag views mortals primarily as elements that require organization. He doesn't hate or love mortals any more than a mathematician hates or loves numbers. They are simply components in the cosmic equation that must be arranged according to proper principles. This detached perspective makes Jyggalag simultaneously one of the least personally threatening and most existentially terrifying of the Daedric princes. He has no interest in torture, corruption, or manipulation for their own sake, but his vision of perfect order would eliminate every aspect of existence that mortals value: free will, creativity, love, art, and the beautiful unpredictability that makes life worth living. The artifacts associated with Jyggalag reflect his mathematical perfection and his role as the organizing force of the universe. The staff of Sheogorath, when wielded during the Grey March, transforms from an instrument of chaos into a tool of perfect order, capable of imposing mathematical organization on any system it touches. Other artifacts attributed to Jyggalag function according to precise, predictable principles, offering powerful effects that come with clearly defined limitations and costs. Jyggalag's current status as a free agent represents one of the most significant wildcards in the cosmic politics of the Elder Scrolls universe. His power rivals or exceeds that of any other Daedric prince. His goals are fundamentally incompatible with the desires of virtually every other cosmic entity, and his methods are patient, systematic, and ultimately irresistible. The other princes who originally cursed him now face the prospect of dealing with a fully powered Jyggalag who has no reason to forgive their past actions and every motivation to prove that order will ultimately triumph over chaos. Malakath, the spurned and ostracized. From the crystalline perfection of Jyggalag's order, we descend into the ash-choked realm of the Ash Pit, where Malakath, the Daedric prince of the spurned and ostracized, holds court among the outcasts and the vengeful. Once the Aedric deity Trinimac, champion of the Altmer and the strongest of Auriel's servants, Malakath's transformation into a Daedric prince represents one of the most dramatic and tragic falls from grace in all of Elder Scrolls mythology. The story of Malakath's creation is inseparable from that of Boethia, who consumed Trinimac entirely during the early days of Tamrielic history. This was not mere murder, but a fundamental transformation that changed both the consumed and the consumer. Trinimac's noble nature was inverted, his strength turned toward different purposes, and his divine essence twisted into something that the Altmer could no longer recognize or accept. Thus was born Malakath, and with him the Orsimer, the orcs who had once been Trinimac's faithful followers. Malakath appears as a massively built figure, scarred and battle-worn, often depicted with crude armor and weapons that emphasize function over beauty. His form reflects the practical, harsh philosophy he has developed in response to his transformation and the subsequent rejection by those who once revered him. Unlike princes who maintain divine beauty or terrible magnificence, Malakath's appearance speaks to endurance, survival, and the strength that comes from overcoming constant adversity. The prince's realm, the Ash Pit, serves as a perfect reflection of his philosophy and his followers' circumstances. It consists largely of dust, smoke, and the detritus of cosmic conflicts, a place where survival requires constant effort and where beauty is a luxury that few can afford. The Ash Pit is not inherently hostile in the way that realms like Cold Harbor or the Deadlands are, but it is unforgiving, demanding strength and determination from all who would thrive within its boundaries. What makes Malakath unique among the Daedric princes is his genuine care for his followers combined with his absolute refusal to make their lives easier. The prince believes that strength can only be developed through adversity, that wisdom comes from suffering, and that those who have not been tested by hardship cannot truly understand the value of what they possess. This philosophy leads him to actively place obstacles in his followers' paths, not out of cruelty, but out of a genuine desire to help them become stronger. The Orcish people, as Malakath's primary followers, embody this philosophy in their daily lives. Orcish society is built around the concept of proving one's worth through combat, with leadership positions going to those who can defeat their predecessors in fair combat. This might seem like a recipe for constant chaos, but it actually creates a remarkably stable society where everyone knows their place is earned rather than inherited, and where respect must be constantly maintained through demonstrated competence. Malakath's relationship with his Orcish children is complex and demanding. He expects them to be strong, but not cruel, to fight when necessary, but not to seek conflict for its own sake, to protect the weak, but not to coddle them. The prince has no patience for orcs who abuse their strength against those weaker than themselves, viewing such behavior as a sign of fundamental weakness rather than power. True strength, in Malakath's philosophy, is demonstrated by protecting others and taking on the burdens that weaker individuals cannot bear. The establishment and repeated destruction of Orsinium, the Orcish homeland, illustrates both Malakath's protective nature and his belief in the strengthening power of adversity. Each time Orsinium has been built, it has eventually been destroyed by coalitions of neighboring powers who feared or despised the growing Orcish state. Rather than preventing these destructions, Malakath has allowed them to occur, viewing each rebuilding as an opportunity for his people to prove their resilience and determination. This pattern reveals a crucial aspect of Malakath's character: his understanding that external acceptance cannot be forced, only earned through consistent demonstration of worth. The prince knows that his people will never be truly accepted by the broader community of Tamriel's races, and he has made peace with that reality. Instead of pursuing impossible integration, he focuses on ensuring that the orcs become so strong and capable that they can thrive regardless of outside opinion. The Prince's Code of Malakath, the informal set of principles that governs Orcish society, reflects his practical philosophy. The code emphasizes personal responsibility, the importance of keeping one's word, and the obligation to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It also includes provisions for honorable combat, the treatment of enemies, and the proper conduct of daily life. What makes the code particularly interesting is that it is not imposed from above, but rather emerges naturally from Malakath's influence on his followers. Malakath's artifacts tend to be practical rather than ornamental, emphasizing utility and effectiveness over aesthetic appeal. Volendrung, the Hammer of Might, exemplifies this approach. It is a devastatingly effective weapon that enhances its wielder's combat abilities, but it lacks the supernatural complexity or hidden costs associated with artifacts from princes like Clavicus Vile or Hermaeus Mora. What you see is what you get, reflecting Malakath's straightforward approach to power and responsibility. The prince's relationship with other Daedric princes is complicated by his unique origin. Unlike the others, who have existed as Daedra since the beginning of time, Malakath was created through transformation, giving him a perspective that none of his peers can fully understand. He bears particular enmity toward Boethia, though this relationship is more complex than simple hatred. There is also a grudging acknowledgement that the transformation, despite its pain, ultimately served a purpose. Malakath's influence extends beyond the Orcish people to anyone who has been rejected, ostracized, or forced to survive on the margins of society. Outcasts of all races sometimes find themselves drawn to his philosophy. discovering in his teachings a framework for turning their rejection into strength. The prince doesn't promise easy solutions or magical transformations. Instead, he offers a path where suffering can be transmuted into wisdom, and isolation can become self-reliance. The worship of Malakath involves proving oneself through action rather than ritual. His followers demonstrate their faith by overcoming challenges, protecting others, and maintaining their honor, even when doing so costs them personally. The prince values deeds over words, substance over ceremony, and practical help over symbolic gestures. This approach attracts followers who are more interested in results than recognition. In his interactions with mortals, Malakath is notably direct and honest. Unlike princes who speak in riddles or offer tempting bargains with hidden costs, Malakath tells his followers exactly what he expects from them and what they can expect in return. This straightforward approach is both refreshing and intimidating. There are no loopholes or clever interpretations to fall back on, only the clear expectation that one will do what is right, regardless of the personal cost. The prince's role as patron of the spurned extends to his relationship with other outcasts beyond the Orcish people. Dunmer, who have been exiled from their houses, Nords who have been banished from their clans, Imperial soldiers who have been dishonorably discharged. All of these can find purpose and direction in Malakath's teachings. The prince offers them not sympathy, but the tools and philosophy they need to rebuild their lives on their own terms. Mehrunes Dagon, the Prince of Destruction. From the honorable struggles of the outcasts, we plunge into the realm of pure, revolutionary destruction, where Mehrunes Dagon reigns as the Prince of Destruction, Revolution, Energy, and Ambition. Among all the Daedric Princes, few inspire as much immediate terror or represent as direct a threat to the stability of Mundus as this four-armed harbinger of catastrophic change. Mehrunes Dagon appears as a towering humanoid figure with 4 arms, each capable of wielding weapons of devastating power. His skin is the color of molten rock, and his body radiates the intense heat of the forges, where reality itself is melted down and reshaped. The prince's appearance is deliberately intimidating. Unlike princes who might appear beautiful or wise or even whimsically mad, Dagon presents himself as an embodiment of violent force that brook no argument or negotiation. The prince's realm, the Deadlands, serves as a perfect reflection of his sphere of influence. It is a landscape of lava, twisted metal, and the ruins of countless civilizations that have been torn down to make way for whatever comes next. The Deadlands are not merely destructive, they are actively revolutionary, with the very geography constantly shifting and changing as new forms of existence are violently imposed upon old ones. The realm demonstrates that destruction is not an end in itself, but rather the necessary first step in any fundamental transformation. What makes Mehrunes Dagon particularly dangerous is his role as the patron of mortal ambition. While other princes might corrupt mortals through temptation or gradual influence, Dagon appeals directly to the revolutionary spirit that exists in every thinking being, the desire to tear down unjust systems, to overthrow corrupt authorities, and to remake the world according to one's own vision. This makes him simultaneously one of the most evil and most necessary of the Daedric princes. The prince's influence can be seen in every revolution, every uprising, and every moment when the established order crumbles before the force of popular will. However, Dagon's concept of revolution goes far beyond mere political change. He represents the cosmic principle that nothing can remain static forever, that all systems eventually become corrupt or outdated, and that periodic destruction is necessary to clear the way for new growth and development. Mehrunes Dagon's most famous intervention in mortal affairs was the Oblivion crisis, when he attempted to physically merge his realm with Mundus through a series of Oblivion gates opened across Tamriel. This invasion was not merely an attempt at conquest, but rather a fundamental reimagining of reality itself. Had Dagon succeeded, the distinction between the mortal world and the Deadlands would have disappeared, creating a new form of existence where constant revolution and transformation would replace the stable natural laws that govern normal reality. The Oblivion crisis demonstrated both Dagon's incredible power and the limitations that constrain even the mightiest Daedric princes. The barriers between Oblivion and Mundus are not merely magical constructs, but fundamental aspects of how reality is organized. Breaking them required an enormous expenditure of energy and the careful manipulation of prophecy and mortal agents over centuries of planning. Even then, the invasion was ultimately thwarted by the intervention of Akatosh himself, demonstrating that there are powers in the universe capable of checking even Mehrunes Dagon's ambitions. The mythic Dawn cult, which served as Dagon's primary instrument during the Oblivion crisis, illustrates the seductive nature of the prince's philosophy. The cultists genuinely believed that they were working to free Tamriel from the artificial constraints imposed by the Aedra, viewing the existing world as a prison that prevented mortals from achieving their true potential. From their perspective, Dagon's invasion was not destruction, but liberation, the violent birth of a new and better reality. This perspective reflects a crucial aspect of Mehrunes Dagon's appeal. The prince doesn't simply offer power or wealth or knowledge, he offers purpose. He provides his followers with a cosmic mission that justifies any sacrifice and validates their discontent with the status quo. For mortals who feel trapped by circumstances beyond their control, Dagon's promise of revolutionary change can be irresistibly attractive. The prince's artifacts embody his philosophy of destruction as a tool for transformation. Mehrunes' razor, perhaps his most famous creation, is a dagger capable of instantly killing any target, regardless of their defenses or supernatural protections. However, this power comes with the limitation that it only works occasionally, reflecting Dagon's understanding that destruction must be precisely timed to be truly effective. Random violence accomplishes nothing, but destruction applied at the right moment can reshape reality itself. The Mysterium Xarxes, the sacred text of the mythic Dawn cult, represents another aspect of Dagon's influence. This book contains the philosophical framework that transforms ordinary discontent into revolutionary fervor, providing both the intellectual justification for destroying the existing order and the practical methods for accomplishing that destruction. The text is simultaneously a religious scripture, a political manifesto, and a manual for cosmic revolution. Mehrunes Dagon's relationship with other Daedric princes is characterized by his role as an agent of change in cosmic politics. While princes like Jiggalag represent stability and order, and others like Hermaeus Mora embody the accumulation and preservation of knowledge, Dagon serves as the force that prevents the cosmic system from becoming too rigid or stagnant. His very existence ensures that no arrangement of power, no matter how stable it appears, can last forever. This role puts him into conflict with princes who have invested heavily in maintaining particular arrangements. However, it also makes him a valuable ally for princes who benefit from periodic reshuffling of cosmic hierarchies. The complex web of alliances and enmities among the Daedric princes is constantly shifting, and Dagon's influence often serves as the catalyst for these changes. The prince's worship among mortals tends to attract those who have been systematically oppressed or who have ambitious visions that cannot be achieved within existing social structures. Revolutionary leaders, ambitious mages, and anyone who dreams of fundamentally altering their circumstances may find themselves drawn to Dagon's philosophy. However, the prince demands more than mere lip service. His followers must be willing to actually destroy the old to make way for the new. What makes Mehrunes Dagon particularly dangerous is his understanding that most mortals are fundamentally conservative, preferring the familiar misery of their current circumstances to the uncertain promise of revolutionary change. To overcome this natural resistance, the prince provides his followers with both the philosophical framework to justify extreme action and the magical power necessary to carry out their plans. This combination of ideology and capability has made Dagon's cults responsible for some of the most dramatic upheavals in Tamrielic history. The prince's influence extends beyond obvious revolutionaries to anyone engaged in the process of fundamental change. Artists who break with traditional forms, scholars who challenge established knowledge, and inventors who create new technologies all participate, knowingly or not, in Dagon's sphere of influence. The creative destruction that drives innovation and progress reflects the same cosmic principles that fuel his more overtly violent manifestations. Mythala, the web spinner. From the realm of revolutionary destruction, we move into the shadowy domain of secrets, lies, and intricate plots, where Mythala weaves her webs of manipulation across the mortal world. Known as the web spinner, the prince of murder, and the anticipation of Vivek in Dun mythology, Mythala represents perhaps the most subtle and psychologically complex of all the Daedric princes, whose influence operates through whispered secrets and carefully orchestrated betrayals rather than direct confrontation. Mythala most commonly appears as a beautiful woman shrouded in shadow, though the prince's true form incorporates elements of the spider that serves as her primary symbol. Unlike princes whose appearances immediately declare their dangerous nature, Mythala presents herself as someone trustworthy and alluring, drawing mortals close before revealing the web of manipulation that has already entrapped them. This deceptive beauty reflects the prince's fundamental approach to power. She achieves her goals not through force or obvious temptation, but through the careful cultivation of trust that will later be betrayed. The prince's realm, the spiral skein, embodies her approach to existence as an interconnected web of relationships and obligations. The realm consists of 8 separate regions connected by bridges of crystallized shadow, each devoted to different aspects of Mythala's sphere: murder, secrets, manipulation, seduction, betrayal, and the complex social dynamics that arise when these elements interact. The spiral skein demonstrates that chaos and order are not opposites, but rather different perspectives on the same underlying pattern. What makes Mythala particularly fascinating among the Daedric princes is her role as both destroyer and creator of social structures. While princes like Mehrunes Dagon tear down existing systems through violent revolution, Mythala works from within, using the natural tensions and conflicts that exist in any complex society to gradually reshape that society according to her vision. She understands that the most effective way to control people is to make them believe that they are acting according to their own free will. The prince's influence on the development of Dunmer society provides the clearest example of her long-term approach to social engineering. Working alongside Azura and Boethia, Mythala helped guide the Chimera people in their exodus from Somerset Isle and their establishment of a new homeland in Morrowind. However, where Azura provided prophetic guidance and Boethia offered the philosophy of righteous rebellion, Mythala contributed the subtle arts of politics, espionage, and social manipulation that would be necessary for the Chimera to survive and thrive in their new environment. The great houses of Morrowind, with their complex networks of alliance and rivalry, bear the clear mark of Mythala's influence. Each house maintains its own intelligence networks, engages in constant political maneuvering, and balances cooperation with competition in ways that create a stable but dynamic social system. This system appears chaotic to outsiders, but it actually represents a sophisticated form of organization, where conflict serves as a mechanism for continuous adaptation and improvement. Mythala's creation of the Morag Tong demonstrates her understanding that even murder can serve as a tool for social stability when properly regulated. The Morag Tong operates as a legal assassination guild, providing a mechanism for resolving conflicts that might otherwise explode into open warfare. By channeling the natural human tendency toward violence into a formal system with rules and limitations, Mythala created an institution that actually reduces overall bloodshed, while maintaining the dynamic tension that prevents society from becoming stagnant. This approach reveals a crucial aspect of Mythala's philosophy. She believes that conflict and competition are necessary for growth and development, but she also understands that uncontrolled violence leads to destruction rather than progress. The prince's genius lies in her ability to create systems that harness destructive impulses and channel them toward constructive ends, even when the individuals involved are unaware of the larger pattern their actions serve. The relationship between the Morag Tong and its later offspring, the Dark Brotherhood, illustrates the complex legacy of Mythala's influence. While the Morag Tong operated within the law and served the stability of Dunmer society, the Dark Brotherhood rejected all external authority and embraced murder as a religious sacrament. Some scholars believe that Mythala deliberately encouraged this schism, creating two organizations that would compete with each other while advancing different aspects of her sphere of influence. Mythala's artifacts reflect her preference for subtle influence over direct confrontation. The ebony blade, perhaps her most famous creation, grows stronger as it is used to murder trusted friends and allies. This weapon embodies the prince's philosophy that the most effective betrayals come from those closest to us, and that true power often requires the willingness to sacrifice personal relationships for larger goals. The blade's requirement for intimate betrayal ensures that its wielders become increasingly isolated and dependent on its power, making them ideal servants for a prince who understands the value of lonely, desperate agents. The Ring of Khajiit, another of Mythala's artifacts, enhances its wearer's ability to move unseen and unheard, reflecting the prince's preference for working from shadows rather than in open daylight. However, the ring also influences its wearer's personality, gradually making them more secretive, paranoid, and inclined to trust in manipulation rather than honest communication. This demonstrates Mythala's understanding that power always comes with a price, and that the tools we use to achieve our goals inevitably shape who we become. The prince's worship among mortals tends to attract those who work in the shadows of society: spies, assassins, politicians, and anyone whose success depends on understanding and manipulating complex social dynamics. However, Mythala's influence extends far beyond these obvious candidates to include anyone engaged in the delicate art of managing relationships and social obligations. Merchants who negotiate complex trade agreements, nobles who navigate court intrigue, and even ordinary people trying to advance within their communities all participate in Mythala's sphere of influence. What makes Mythala particularly dangerous is her understanding that most people genuinely believe they are acting according to moral principles, even when their actions serve selfish or destructive ends. The prince doesn't corrupt her followers by convincing them to abandon their values. Instead, she helps them rationalize how their existing values justify actions that serve her purposes. This approach is far more effective than direct temptation, because it allows people to maintain their self-image as good and moral individuals while committing acts that gradually draw them deeper into her web. The prince's relationship with other Daedric princes reflects her preference for working through alliances and agreements rather than direct confrontation. Mythala has been known to collaborate with princes whose spheres complement her own, while carefully maintaining her independence and pursuing her own agenda. These alliances often involve the exchange of information, services, or favors, creating a complex network of obligations and dependencies that mirrors the webs she weaves in mortal society. Mythala's influence on the development of espionage and intelligence gathering as organized activities cannot be overstated. The prince understands that information is the most valuable currency in any complex society, and that those who control the flow of information can shape events without ever appearing to directly intervene. Her followers have been instrumental in establishing the intelligence networks that help maintain stability in various governments across Tamriel, though they also ensure that these networks serve Mephala interests as well as those of their nominal masters. The prince's approach to long-term planning demonstrates a patience and sophistication that rivals even Hermaeus Mora's accumulation of knowledge. Mephala's schemes often unfold over multiple generations, with each phase carefully designed to create the conditions necessary for the next stage of development. This approach allows her to achieve goals that would be impossible through direct action, while ensuring that her influence becomes so deeply embedded in the structure of society that it cannot be easily removed. Meridia, the Lady of Infinite Energies. From the shadowy webs of manipulation and murder, we ascend into the blazing realm of pure light and energy, where Meridia holds dominion over life force, the flow of energy, and the eternal struggle against undeath. Known as the Lady of Infinite Energies, the Bright Lady, and the enemy of necromancers across Tamriel, Meridia occupies a unique position among the Daedric Princes as one whose sphere often aligns with what mortals consider virtuous goals. Meridia's origins set her apart from other Daedric princes in fundamental ways. Unlike her peers, who emerged from the primordial chaos at the beginning of time, Meridia was once a Magna G, one of the star spirits who served under Magnus and helped design the mortal world. When Magnus and most of his followers abandoned the project of creation and fled to Aetherius, Meridia chose a different path, transforming herself into a Daedric prince and claiming dominion over the energies of life itself. The prince appears as a figure of blinding radiance, her form composed of pure light and energy that shifts and flows like liquid starfire. Mortals who look directly upon Meridia often find themselves temporarily blinded, not from malice, but simply because her essential nature is too bright for mortal eyes to process safely. This luminous appearance reflects her sphere of influence. She embodies the life energy that flows through all living things, the spark that separates the quick from the dead. Meridia's realm, known as the Coloured Rooms, exists as a series of interconnected chambers, each filled with different hues of pure light. The realm pulses with life energy, creating an environment where the boundary between thought and reality becomes fluid. Visitors to the Coloured Rooms report experiencing visions of perfect clarity and understanding, as if the light itself carries knowledge and wisdom. However, this enlightenment comes at a cost. Prolonged exposure to such pure energy can burn away aspects of personality and memory that Meridia considers unnecessary or corrupting. What makes Meridia particularly complex among the Daedric princes is her genuine commitment to what she perceives as the greater good, combined with a complete lack of understanding or concern for individual mortal agency. The prince views existence through the lens of cosmic energy flows and life force dynamics, seeing mortals as components in a vast system rather than as independent beings with their own desires and rights. This perspective leads her to make decisions that benefit the overall health of the system, while potentially causing tremendous suffering for individual mortals caught in the process. The prince's hatred of undeath stems from her fundamental nature as a being of life energy. To Meridia, undead creatures represent a perversion of the natural order. They consume life energy without contributing anything back to the cosmic flow, creating dead zones in the network of forces that sustain existence. This makes necromancy not merely morally objectionable, but cosmically dangerous, a practice that literally threatens the stability of reality itself. Meridia's approach to combating undeath demonstrates both her power and her limitations. Rather than intervening directly, she typically works through champions and chosen agents, providing them with enhanced abilities and artifacts specifically designed to combat undead threats. This indirect approach reflects the constraints that bind all Daedric princes when operating in the mortal world, but it also reveals something crucial about Meridia's character. She believes that mortals must take responsibility for maintaining the cosmic balance, rather than relying on divine intervention to solve their problems. The Dawnbreaker, Meridia's most famous artifact, embodies her philosophy of combating darkness through the application of pure light. This sword burns with inner radiance and is particularly effective against undead creatures, but it also influences its wielder's personality and goals. Those who carry Dawnbreaker for extended periods often find themselves becoming increasingly obsessed with hunting undead and purifying corruption, sometimes at the expense of other important considerations. This reflects Meridia's tendency to view all problems through the lens of her particular sphere of influence. The prince's relationship with her mortal champions reveals the double-edged nature of serving a being whose goals align with conventional morality, but whose methods remain fundamentally alien. Meridia genuinely wants to protect life and preserve the natural order, but she defines these concepts in cosmic rather than personal terms. A champion of Meridia might find themselves called upon to destroy an entire village of plague victims to prevent the spread of a necromantic curse, or to eliminate a group of healers whose methods involve trafficking with spirits in ways that Meridia considers dangerous. This utilitarian approach to morality makes Meridia simultaneously one of the most helpful and most dangerous of the Daedric princes to work with. Her goals are generally beneficial to mortal welfare, but her methods can be ruthless when she determines that short-term suffering is necessary to prevent long-term catastrophe. The prince operates according to a cosmic perspective where individual lives matter less than the overall health of the life energy systems that sustain existence. Meridia's worship among mortals tends to attract those whose lives have been touched by undeath or necromantic corruption, survivors of vampire attacks, witnesses to necromantic rituals, and anyone who has lost loved ones to undead creatures often find solace in the prince's promise of purification and restoration. However, Meridia also attracts followers among healers, life mages, and others whose work involves channeling and directing life energy for beneficial purposes. The rituals associated with Meridia's worship emphasize purification, the channeling of life energy, and the active opposition to necromantic practices. Her temples often feature arrays of prisms and mirrors designed to focus and amplify natural light, creating environments where the boundary between the mortal world and Meridia's realm becomes thin. These sacred spaces serve as powerful tools for detecting and combating undead influences, but they can also be overwhelming for mortals who are not prepared for direct exposure to such concentrated life energy. The prince's relationship with other Daedric princes reflects her unique position as a former Magna G and her commitment to preserving cosmic balance. Meridia has been known to ally herself with princes whose spheres complement her own goals, particularly in situations where undeath or necromantic corruption threatens the stability of existence itself. However, she also comes into conflict with princes whose domains involve death, decay, or the manipulation of life energy for purposes she considers inappropriate. Meridia's influence on the development of healing arts and life magic cannot be overstated. Many of the most effective techniques for channeling and directing life energy trace their origins back to visions or inspirations provided by the prince. However, Meridia's version of healing often involves not just restoring health, but purifying the patient of any influences she considers corrupting, which can include personality traits, memories, or relationships that the individual values highly. The prince's involvement in major historical events typically revolves around threats to the cosmic balance posed by powerful necromancers or undead entities. During such crises, Meridia may provide direct assistance to mortal heroes, offering them enhanced abilities and powerful artifacts. However, she expects these champions to continue serving her interests, even after the immediate crisis has passed. creating long-term obligations that can significantly alter the champion's life path. What makes Meridia particularly challenging for mortals to understand is her complete certainty in the righteousness of her cause, combined with her alien perspective on what constitutes appropriate means to achieve righteous ends. The prince genuinely wants to help mortals and protect the world from corruption, but her definition of help and protection may involve actions that mortals find traumatic or unacceptable. This creates situations where refusing Meridia's assistance may lead to greater harm, but accepting it may require compromising personal values or accepting consequences that extend far beyond the immediate situation. Molag Bal, the king of rape. From the blazing purity of Meridia's light, we descend into the depths of Coldharbour, the most feared realm in all of Oblivion, where Molag Bal reigns as the prince of domination, enslavement, and corruption. Known by many terrible titles, the king of rape, the lord of brutality, the harvester of souls, Molag Bal represents perhaps the most overtly evil and malevolent of all Daedric princes, whose very existence seems dedicated to the corruption and suffering of all other beings. Molag Bal appears as a massive, horned figure, combining the worst aspects of humanoid and bestial forms. His appearance varies depending on the needs of the moment, but he consistently presents himself as a being of overwhelming physical presence and predatory intent. Unlike princes who might disguise their dangerous nature behind beautiful or appealing forms, Molag Bal makes no attempt to hide what he is: a cosmic predator whose strength lies in his ability to dominate and corrupt others through the application of superior force. The prince's realm, Coldharbour, serves as a nightmarish reflection of the mortal world, featuring twisted versions of familiar landscapes and structures. The realm appears as a dark parody of Tamriel itself, with a burning sky, frozen ground, and architecture that combines the grandest achievements of mortal civilization with the most horrific aspects of infernal design. Coldharbour demonstrates Molag Bal's philosophy that all beauty and achievement can be perverted into instruments of suffering and control. What makes Molag Bal particularly terrifying is his focus on corruption rather than simple destruction. While princes like Mehrunes Dagon seek to tear down existing structures to make way for something new, Molag Bal prefers to twist and pervert those structures, turning them into mockeries of their original purpose. This approach reflects his understanding that the most effective way to break someone's spirit is to corrupt the things they value most, rather than simply taking those things away. The prince's sphere of domination encompasses not just physical control, but psychological and spiritual enslavement as well. Molag Bal seeks to break the will of his victims so completely that they become willing participants in their own degradation. This process of corruption often begins with the victim being placed in situations where they must choose between terrible options, gradually wearing down their moral resistance until they begin to rationalize increasingly horrific actions as necessary for survival. Molag Bal's creation of vampirism represents perhaps his greatest triumph in the realm of cosmic corruption. The prince transformed Lamai Bal, a Nedic virgin, into the first vampire through a process of rape, murder, and necromantic resurrection that combined physical violation with spiritual corruption. This act created a form of undeath that spreads through intimate contact, ensuring that vampirism carries with it the spiritual poison of its creation. Every vampire bears within them a fragment of Molag Bal's corruption, making them unwilling agents of his influence even when they believe they are acting according to their own desires. The vampiric condition exemplifies Molag Bal's approach to corruption. It grants tremendous power and extended life, but at the cost of fundamental humanity. Vampires must feed on the life force of others to survive, gradually becoming more monstrous as they distance themselves from their mortal origins. The prince ensures that even vampires who try to maintain their humanity find themselves constantly struggling against urges and needs that gradually wear down their moral resistance. The prince's artifacts reflect his preference for domination and control over subtle influence. The Mace of Molag Bal drains the stamina and magical energy of enemies while transferring that power to its wielder, embodying the prince's philosophy that strength should be taken from others rather than developed independently. The mace also influences its wielder's personality, making them more aggressive and domineering in their interactions with others. Molag Bal's worship among mortals tends to attract those who have been broken by suffering and seek power as a means of ensuring they never experience weakness again. The prince offers his followers the ability to dominate others, but he demands that they first submit completely to his will. This creates a hierarchy of abuse where each level of followers exercises power over those below them while remaining subservient to those above, with Molag Bal at the apex of the system. The rituals associated with Molag Bal's worship often involve the breaking of social taboos and the systematic corruption of innocence. The prince delights in ceremonies that force participants to betray their own values and harm those they claim to care about. These rituals serve multiple purposes. They bind the participants to Molag Bal through shared guilt and complicity. They provide the prince with entertainment, and they create networks of compromised individuals who can be used for future operations. What makes Molag Bal particularly dangerous is his understanding that most people possess a breaking point beyond which they will abandon their principles to avoid further suffering. The prince has perfected techniques for identifying and exploiting these breaking points, often spending considerable time and effort to create situations where his targets must choose between physical destruction and moral corruption. He particularly enjoys targeting individuals who are respected for their virtue and integrity, as their fall provides him with both personal satisfaction and practical advantages in corrupting their followers and communities. The prince's relationship with other Daedric princes is characterized by mutual wariness and occasional hostility. Even among beings who represent various forms of chaos and destruction, Molag Bal stands apart as uniquely focused on causing suffering for its own sake. While other princes pursue goals that can be understood, if not sympathized with, Molag Bal's motivations seem to center purely on the exercise of power over others and the pleasure he derives from their pain. Molag Bal's influence on the development of slavery, torture, and systematic oppression throughout Tamrielic history cannot be ignored. While these practices would likely exist without his influence, the prince has consistently worked to make them more efficient, more psychologically damaging, and more resistant to reform efforts. His followers have been instrumental in developing techniques for breaking the human spirit and maintaining control over large populations through the strategic application of fear and brutality. The prince's involvement in major historical events often revolves around the corruption of powerful institutions or individuals. Rather than working to destroy governments or organizations outright, Molag Bal prefers to infiltrate them with his agents, gradually turning them into instruments of oppression and corruption. This approach allows him to achieve his goals while maintaining plausible deniability and avoiding the kind of direct confrontation that might unite his enemies against him. The Plane Meld, Molag Bal's attempt to merge Cold Harbor with Tamriel during the events of the Elder Scrolls Online, represents his most ambitious project in recorded history. Rather than simply invading the mortal world, the prince sought to fundamentally alter the nature of reality itself, creating a new form of existence where the boundaries between oppressor and victim, corruption and purity, would be permanently blurred. The failure of this project demonstrates that even Molag Bal's power has limits, but it also reveals the scope of his ambitions and his willingness to risk everything to achieve ultimate dominion. What makes Molag Bal ultimately terrifying is not just his power or his cruelty, but his patience and his understanding of mortal psychology. The prince knows that most people can be corrupted given sufficient pressure and the right circumstances. He is willing to invest centuries in corrupting a single individual if that corruption will serve his larger goals. This long-term approach, combined with his vast resources and supernatural abilities, makes him a threat that extends far beyond any single confrontation or crisis. Namira, the Lady of Decay. From the active malice of Coldharbour, we descend even deeper into decay and degradation, entering the domain of Namira, the Lady of Decay, the Mistress of Revulsion, and the ancient spirit who embodies everything that civilized society seeks to reject and forget. Among all the Daedric Princes, Namira represents perhaps the most primal and fundamental form of horror, not the dramatic violence of Mehrunes Dagon or the calculated cruelty of Molag Bal, but the slow, inevitable decay that consumes all things. Namira appears as a cloaked figure whose form seems to shift between different states of decomposition and putrefaction. Unlike princes who present themselves as powerful or beautiful or terrible, Namira embodies the aesthetic of decline and abandonment. Her presence is marked by the smell of rot, the sound of insects, and the visual signs of entropy that remind mortals of their own mortality and the temporary nature of all achievements. The prince's realm, known as the Scuttling Void, exists as a testament to the beauty that can be found in decay and abandonment. Here, magnificent structures slowly crumble into ruin while being consumed by strange plants and inhabited by creatures that thrive in environments others would consider uninhabitable. The Scuttling Void demonstrates that destruction and creation are not opposites, but different aspects of the same eternal cycle, and that something can be simultaneously dying and alive, corrupted and pure. What makes Namira unique among the Daedric Princes is her role as the patron of those whom society has rejected and forgotten. While other princes might attract followers through promises of power, knowledge, or transformation, Namira offers something different: acceptance of one's low estate, and the promise that even in degradation, one can find purpose and community. She gathers to herself the diseased, the outcast, the mentally ill, and all those who exist on the margins of civilized society. The prince's sphere encompasses not just physical decay, but also social and spiritual degradation. Namira represents the things that people prefer not to think about: disease, aging, death, poverty, mental illness, and all the forms of suffering that remind mortals of their vulnerability and mortality. However, rather than simply wallowing in these negative aspects of existence, Namira teaches her followers to find strength and wisdom in their afflictions. Ancient Khajiit mythology recognizes Namira as an Urdra, one of the eldest and most fundamental of the Daedric Princes, whose influence predates most other cosmic entities. This ancient status gives her a perspective on existence that encompasses vast cycles of growth and decay, creation and destruction that shorter-lived beings cannot comprehend. From this perspective, the suffering and degradation that characterizes individual mortal experience is simply part of a larger pattern that serves essential cosmic functions. Namira's relationship with her followers differs fundamentally from the worship patterns associated with other Daedric princes. Rather than demanding service or tribute, she simply accepts her followers as they are, without judgment or expectation of improvement. This unconditional acceptance can be profoundly healing for individuals who have been rejected by conventional society, but it can also trap them in cycles of self-destructive behavior if they interpret her acceptance as validation of their worst impulses. The prince's artifacts tend to reflect her sphere of decay and degradation, while offering practical benefits to those willing to embrace her aesthetic. The Ring of Namira, for example, enhances its wearer's ability to feed on human flesh, reflecting the prince's association with cannibalism and the breaking of fundamental social taboos. However, the ring also provides protection and sustenance, ensuring that those who are willing to violate society's deepest prohibitions need never fear starvation or vulnerability. Namira's influence on the development of various forms of outcasts and marginalized communities throughout Tamrielic history has been significant but often overlooked. Beggar networks, communities of the diseased and outcast, and underground societies of cannibals and other taboo practitioners often show signs of her influence. These groups typically develop their own forms of social organization and mutual support that allow them to survive and even thrive despite being rejected by mainstream society. The prince's worship tends to center around the acceptance and even celebration of things that conventional society considers disgusting or horrifying. Followers may engage in ritual consumption of decaying food, deliberate exposure to disease, or practices designed to accelerate physical and social deterioration. These activities serve multiple purposes. They bind the participants together through shared transgression. They provide spiritual communion with Namira's essence, and they demonstrate the follower's commitment to rejecting conventional social values. What makes Namira particularly complex is her role as both a source of genuine comfort for the suffering and a force that can trap people in cycles of degradation. For someone who has lost everything and been rejected by society, Namira's unconditional acceptance can provide the emotional support necessary for psychological survival. However, this same acceptance can prevent individuals from seeking improvement or escape from their circumstances, as any attempt to rise above their degraded state might be interpreted as a rejection of the prince's gifts. The prince's relationship with other Daedric princes reflects her unique position as the embodiment of fundamental cosmic processes rather than specific ambitions or desires. While other princes might compete for influence or resources, Namira simply represents forces that will eventually touch all existence, regardless of the outcomes of their conflicts. This gives her a certain detachment from cosmic politics, though she has been known to ally herself with princes whose spheres complement her own when specific circumstances warrant intervention. Namira's influence extends beyond obvious outcasts to anyone who has experienced significant loss, illness, or social rejection. The prince offers a framework for understanding suffering that transforms it from meaningless pain into a form of spiritual experience that connects the sufferer to fundamental truths about existence. This perspective can provide genuine comfort and strength, but it can also become a trap that prevents individuals from seeking practical solutions to their problems. The prince's role in the development of various healing traditions is often overlooked, but significant. Many effective treatments for disease and injury were first developed by outcasts and marginalized communities who had nowhere else to turn for help. Namira's followers, living in close contact with disease and decay, often develop practical knowledge about these conditions that proves valuable even to those who reject the prince's philosophy. The cults associated with Namira typically operate in hidden locations: sewers, abandoned buildings, forgotten crypts, and other places that mainstream society avoids. These spaces serve as sanctuaries where the prince's followers can gather without fear of persecution, but they also reinforce the social isolation that keeps them dependent on Namira's acceptance. The physical environment of these gathering places often reflects the prince's aesthetic, with deliberate decay and the presence of creatures that thrive in filth and darkness. Nocturnal. The Night Mistress. From the realm of decay and social outcasts, we ascend into the primordial darkness that existed before creation itself, where Nocturnal reigns as the Night Mistress, the Urdra, and perhaps the most ancient and mysterious of all Daedric princes. Known as the Lady of Shadows, the Empress of Murk, and simply as Night's Mistress, Nocturnal embodies the fundamental darkness that serves as the canvas upon which all other existence is painted. Nocturnal's claim to be the most ancient of the Daedric Princes is supported by her title of Urdra, a designation that suggests she predates not only her fellow princes, but possibly even the distinction between Aedra and Daedra. The prince herself claims that, before Oblivion, there was Nocturnal, positioning herself as a primordial force that existed in the void before the creation of the various planes of existence. This ancient nature gives her a perspective on cosmic events that spans the entire history of existence itself. The prince appears as a figure shrouded in ever-shifting darkness, her form barely visible even to those who serve her directly. Unlike other princes who present themselves in forms designed to inspire awe, fear, or attraction, Nocturnal embodies the concept of the unknown and unknowable. Her presence is marked not by what can be seen, but by what cannot be perceived, creating an atmosphere of mystery that extends to every aspect of her sphere of influence. Nocturnal's realm, Evergloam, exists as a twilight realm of eternal dusk, where shadows have substance and light behaves according to rules that differ from those governing other planes. The realm serves as a vast network of interconnected shadows that extends across all of creation, allowing the prince to observe and influence events throughout the universe without being directly detected. Evergloam demonstrates that darkness is not merely the absence of light, but a fundamental force with its own properties and capabilities. What makes Nocturnal unique among the Daedric Princes is her sphere of influence over luck, fate, and the unknown paths that shape destiny. While other princes represent aspects of existence that mortals can understand and relate to, Nocturnal embodies the fundamental uncertainty that underlies all experience. She represents the things that cannot be predicted, controlled, or fully comprehended, serving as a constant reminder that there are forces in the universe that operate beyond mortal understanding. The prince's relationship with thieves and stealth-based activities reflects her domain over hidden knowledge and secret paths. Nocturnal doesn't simply patronize theft for its own sake, but rather supports those who operate in the spaces between official recognition and social acknowledgement. Her followers include not just common thieves, but also spies, scouts, and anyone whose work requires them to move through the world without being noticed or understood. The Thieves Guild's connection to Nocturnal demonstrates the prince's approach to mortal affairs. She provides tools and opportunities for her followers to achieve their goals, but she expects them to succeed through their own skill and determination rather than relying on divine intervention. The Guild's emphasis on personal ability, mutual support, and respect for professional standards reflects Nocturnal's belief that true strength comes from mastering one's craft, rather than depending on external power. Nocturnal's most famous artifact, the Skeleton Key, embodies her domain over hidden paths and secret knowledge. This lockpick can open any lock, whether physical, magical, or metaphysical, representing the prince's ability to reveal paths that others cannot perceive. However, the key's power extends beyond simple lockpicking to include the ability to unlock potential, reveal hidden truths, and open passages between different states of existence. The artifact demonstrates that boundaries and limitations are often more flexible than they appear to those who lack the proper tools and knowledge to transcend them. The Nightingales, Nocturnal's most devoted servants, illustrate the prince's approach to worship and service. Rather than demanding blind obedience or emotional devotion, Nocturnal seeks followers who can operate independently while maintaining their commitment to her principles. The Nightingales serve as agents of luck and fate, ensuring that events unfold according to patterns that serve the prince's mysterious agenda while appearing to be natural consequences of individual choices and actions. And what makes serving Nocturnal particularly complex is the prince's tendency to work through indirect influence rather than explicit commands. Her followers often find themselves in situations where they must interpret signs and omens to determine what action the prince desires, requiring a level of intuition and understanding that goes beyond simple obedience. This approach develops followers who are capable of independent thought and action, but it also creates uncertainty about whether one is truly serving the prince's will or simply following personal inclinations. The prince's relationship with other Daedric princes is complicated by her ancient status and her tendency to operate through methods that her peers cannot fully understand or predict. Nocturnal rarely engages in direct confrontation with other princes, preferring to work through subtle influence and long-term manipulation that achieves her goals without revealing her involvement. This approach has allowed her to maintain her position and influence across multiple cosmic upheavals, while avoiding the kind of direct conflicts that have affected other princes. Nocturnal's influence on the development of various intelligence and information networks throughout Tamrielic history has been significant, but deliberately obscured. The prince understands that the most effective intelligence operations are those that are never discovered, and her followers have been instrumental in establishing networks that provide crucial information to various governments and organizations while maintaining their independence and loyalty to Nocturnal's agenda. The rituals associated with Nocturnal's worship tend to emphasize the development of skills and abilities that allow followers to operate effectively in shadows and uncertainty. Rather than elaborate ceremonies or displays of devotion, the prince prefers practical demonstrations of competence and the gradual development of expertise that makes her followers more effective agents of her will. This approach attracts individuals who are motivated by personal excellence and the satisfaction of mastering difficult skills. The prince's temples and shrines are typically hidden in plain sight, disguised as other types of structures, or integrated into existing buildings in ways that make them difficult to identify unless one knows what to look for. These locations serve as meeting places for her followers and as repositories for information and resources that support the prince's various operations. The design of these spaces reflects Nocturnal's preference for function over form, with emphasis placed on practical considerations rather than impressive display. Nocturnal's role in cosmic events often involves ensuring that crucial information reaches the right people at the right time, or conversely, preventing information from being discovered by those who would misuse it. The prince operates as a cosmic intelligence broker, managing the flow of knowledge and opportunity in ways that serve her long-term agenda while maintaining the appearance of natural coincidence and individual choice. What makes Nocturnal particularly fascinating is her apparent lack of obvious personal ambitions or desires for power in the conventional sense. Unlike princes who seek to expand their influence or achieve specific goals, Nocturnal seems content to maintain her role as the guardian of hidden paths and secret knowledge. This detachment from conventional motivations makes her both more trustworthy and more unpredictable than princes whose desires can be more easily understood and anticipated. Periite, the taskmaster. From the ancient shadows of cosmic mystery, we turn to examine perhaps the most underestimated and misunderstood of all Daedric princes. Periite, the taskmaster, the prince of pestilence, and the keeper of natural order who operates in the background of cosmic events, while his more dramatic peers claim the spotlight. Known as the weakest of the Daedric princes, Periite's true power lies not in dramatic displays of might, but in his essential role as the cosmic force that maintains the basic functioning of existence itself. Periite appears most commonly in the form of a great dragon, though unlike the dragons of Tamriel, who embody power and dominion, the prince's draconic form emphasizes his role as a keeper of natural cycles and universal constants. His scales often appear diseased or discolored, reflecting his association with pestilence and decay. But this apparent weakness masks a fundamental strength. Peryite's influence extends to the basic biological and cosmic processes that sustain all existence. The Prince's realm in Oblivion reflects his role as the administrator of cosmic order, rather than the dramatic landscapes associated with princes like Mehrunes Dagon or the ethereal beauty of realms like Moonshadow. Peryite's domain appears as an endless series of interconnected chambers and passages where the basic work of maintaining reality is carried out by countless lesser Daedra. This realm demonstrates that the most important work is often the least visible, and that cosmic stability depends on countless small tasks being performed correctly and consistently. What makes Peryite unique among the Daedric Princes is his sphere of influence over tasks, natural order, and the maintenance of cosmic systems. While other princes represent forces of change, passion, or transformation, Peryite embodies the principle that some things must remain constant for existence to function properly. He ensures that diseases follow predictable patterns, that natural cycles continue their appointed courses, and that the countless small processes that sustain life operate according to their proper parameters. The prince's association with pestilence and disease is often misunderstood by mortals who view these phenomena as purely negative forces. However, from Peryite's perspective, disease serves essential functions in maintaining the balance of life and death that allows ecosystems to remain healthy over long periods. Plagues eliminate weak populations, prevent overpopulation, and force evolutionary adaptations that strengthen species over time. The prince's diseases are not random chaos, but rather precisely calibrated systems designed to achieve specific biological and cosmic objectives. Peryite's role as the ordering force for lesser Daedra reveals another crucial aspect of his function in the cosmic hierarchy. While other princes command the attention and fear of mortals, Peryite quietly manages the vast bureaucracy of lesser spirits and minor Daedra that actually carry out much of the work involved in maintaining the various planes of Oblivion. This administrative role requires enormous skill and attention to detail, qualities that are less dramatic than the powers wielded by other princes, but arguably more essential to cosmic stability. The prince's artifacts reflect his focus on function over form and his preference for subtle influence over dramatic display. The Spellbreaker, a shield associated with Peryite's worship, provides protection against magical attacks, while enhancing the wielder's ability to resist supernatural influence. The shield's power lies not in active offense, but in defensive capabilities that allow its bearer to maintain their independence and autonomy in the face of overwhelming magical force. What makes Peryite particularly interesting is his apparent acceptance of his position as the weakest of the Daedric Princes. Rather than resenting this designation or attempting to prove his power through dramatic displays, the prince seems to understand that true strength often involves accepting one's role and performing it excellently rather than constantly seeking advancement or recognition. This attitude sets him apart from princes whose ambitions drive them to constant conflict and competition. The prince's worship among mortals tends to attract those who understand the value of persistent, careful work and the importance of maintaining systems rather than constantly changing them. His followers include healers who understand disease, administrators who keep organizations functioning smoothly, and anyone whose work involves maintaining stability in the face of constant pressure for change. These followers rarely receive recognition for their efforts, but their work is essential to the functioning of civilized society. Peryite's relationship with other Daedric princes demonstrates his unique position in cosmic politics. While he rarely engages in direct confrontation with his peers, his control over natural order and cosmic maintenance gives him significant leverage when he chooses to exercise it. the prince has the ability to disrupt the basic systems that other princes depend on for their own operations, making him a more dangerous enemy than his quiet demeanor might suggest. The recent events involving Periite's alliance with Vermina against Hermaeus Mora demonstrate that the prince is willing to take decisive action when he believes that cosmic stability is threatened. His opposition to Mora's manipulation of reality and memory shows that Periite views his role as maintaining natural order seriously enough to risk conflict with more obviously powerful princes when necessary. The prince's approach to disease management reveals a sophisticated understanding of biological and social systems that goes far beyond simple malice or random destruction. Periite's plagues often target specific populations or behaviors that threaten long-term stability, serving as cosmic correction mechanisms that prevent larger catastrophes from developing. This precision requires enormous knowledge and careful calculation, demonstrating that the prince's apparent simplicity masks considerable intelligence and foresight. Periite's influence on the development of healing arts and medical knowledge is often overlooked, but significant. Many advances in understanding disease and developing treatments have come from careful observation of the prince's plagues and the patterns they follow. Healers who serve Periite often develop sophisticated understanding of biological systems that allows them to work with natural processes rather than simply opposing them. The rituals associated with Periite's worship emphasize patience, attention to detail, and the acceptance of necessary but unpleasant tasks. Rather than dramatic ceremonies designed to demonstrate power or devotion, the prince prefers practical activities that contribute to the maintenance of cosmic order. These might include caring for the diseased, maintaining important records, or performing repetitive tasks that serve larger purposes. What makes Periite ultimately powerful despite his reputation for weakness is his essential nature. He represents functions that cannot be eliminated without causing the collapse of cosmic order itself. While other princes could theoretically be removed from existence without destroying the universe, Periite's sphere of influence is so fundamental to basic stability that attacking him would risk damaging the foundation upon which all other existence depends. Sanguine, the Lord of Revelry. From the essential maintenance of cosmic order, we spiral into the realm of pure hedonistic chaos, where Sanguine holds court as the Lord of Revelry, the Prince of Debauchery, and the Daedric embodiment of every form of excess that mortals use to escape the constraints of civilized society. Among all the Daedric Princes, Sanguine represents perhaps the most human and relatable sphere of influence, dealing with desires and impulses that every mortal recognizes within themselves. Sanguine appears as a jovial, rotund figure, whose form shifts to reflect the particular vices and pleasures of whoever observes him. To a drunk, he might appear as the perfect drinking companion. To someone seeking carnal pleasure, he takes on whatever form would be most appealing. To a gambler, he becomes the embodiment of luck and fortune. This chameleonic nature reflects the prince's understanding that debauchery is not a single vice, but rather the abandonment of restraint in pursuit of whatever brings immediate pleasure and satisfaction. The prince's realm, known as the myriad realms of revelry, exists as an infinite series of interconnected party spaces, each designed to cater to specific forms of excess and pleasure-seeking. Unlike other Daedric realms that reflect their prince's singular vision, Sanguine's domain constantly shifts and adapts to accommodate the desires of its current inhabitants. This adaptive quality demonstrates the prince's philosophy that true pleasure cannot be imposed from above, but must emerge from the genuine desires and inclinations of those experiencing it. What makes Sanguine unique among the Daedric princes is his apparent lack of malicious intent toward mortals. While other princes might corrupt, dominate, or manipulate their followers for personal gain, Sanguine seems genuinely interested in helping mortals enjoy themselves and experience pleasures they might otherwise deny themselves. This benevolent approach to temptation makes him simultaneously one of the least threatening and most dangerous of the princes. His gifts come without obvious strings attached, but they can destroy lives just as effectively as more overtly malicious influences. The prince's sphere encompasses all forms of revelry, hedonism, and the pursuit of pleasure for its own sake. This includes obvious vices like drinking, gambling, and sexual excess, but it also extends to more subtle forms of self-indulgence like gluttony, laziness, and the abandonment of responsibilities in favor of immediate gratification. Sanguine represents the part of mortal nature that seeks escape from the burdens and constraints of civilized existence through temporary immersion in pure sensation and pleasure. Sanguine's approach to corrupting mortals differs fundamentally from the methods employed by other Daedric princes. Rather than offering power, knowledge, or revenge, he simply provides opportunities for people to indulge their existing desires without immediate consequences. The prince understands that most mortals already possess the capacity for self-destruction. They simply need permission and opportunity to express it. By removing barriers and consequences, Sanguine allows people to corrupt themselves through their own choices. The famous drinking contest between Sanguine and the last Dragonborn illustrates the prince's approach to mortal interaction. Rather than demanding service or worship, Sanguine simply invites the hero to participate in a night of revelry that spirals increasingly out of control. The prince provides magical protection that prevents permanent harm, while allowing maximum embarrassment and chaos, creating an experience that is simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating for the participant. This event reveals several crucial aspects of Sanguine's character. The prince genuinely enjoys mortal company and takes pleasure in sharing experiences with them, rather than simply using them for his own purposes. However, his definition of fun often involves breaking social conventions and abandoning normal restraints, which can have serious consequences for mortals who must continue living in organized society after their revelry ends. Sanguine's artifacts tend to reflect his philosophy of pleasure-seeking and the temporary abandonment of restraint. The Sanguine Rose, a staff that summons powerful Daedra to fight alongside its wielder, represents the prince's willingness to provide assistance to those who serve his interests. However, the staff's effects are temporary, reflecting Sanguine's understanding that pleasure derived from external sources cannot provide lasting satisfaction. The prince's worship among mortals tends to be spontaneous and informal rather than organized around formal cults or temples. Sanguine's followers are typically people who are already inclined toward hedonistic behavior and who view the prince's influence as validation for their lifestyle choices rather than as a fundamental change in their nature. This approach allows Sanguine to maintain influence across a wide range of social classes and cultural backgrounds, without requiring the kind of total commitment demanded by other princes. The festivals and celebrations associated with Sanguine's worship often involve the temporary suspension of normal social rules and the encouragement of behavior that would normally be considered inappropriate or dangerous. These events serve multiple purposes. They provide outlets for social tensions that might otherwise explode into violence. They allow people to explore aspects of their personality that are normally suppressed. And they demonstrate the appeal of Sanguine's philosophy to potential new followers. What makes Sanguine particularly insidious is his ability to make self-destructive behavior feel natural and inevitable, rather than corrupted or imposed. Unlike princes who obviously transform their followers into something they weren't before, Sanguine simply encourages people to be more of what they already are. This makes it difficult for his followers to recognize when they have crossed the line from healthy pleasure-seeking into genuinely harmful addiction and excess. The prince's relationship with other Daedric princes reflects his generally non-confrontational approach to cosmic politics. Sanguine rarely seeks to expand his influence through conflict or competition, preferring to focus on providing entertainment and pleasure for himself and his followers. However, he has been known to ally himself with princes whose spheres complement his own, particularly in situations where organized society threatens to eliminate the spaces where his followers can express themselves freely. Sanguine's influence on the development of various forms of entertainment, hospitality, and leisure activities throughout Tamrielic history has been significant, but often unrecognized. Many innovations in brewing, gaming, and other pleasure-oriented industries trace their origins back to inspired moments that bear the subtle mark of the prince's influence. However, Sanguine typically prefers to work through existing human creativity rather than imposing alien innovations that would reveal his involvement. The prince's role in various historical celebrations and festivals demonstrates his understanding that temporary excess can actually serve stabilizing functions within organized society. By providing sanctioned opportunities for people to violate normal rules and explore forbidden desires, these events prevent the buildup of social tensions that might otherwise explode into more serious conflicts. Sanguine's festivals serve as safety valves that allow societies to maintain their normal structure while acknowledging human needs that cannot be entirely suppressed. What makes serving Sanguine both appealing and dangerous is the prince's genuine desire for his followers to enjoy themselves, combined with his complete lack of concern for the long-term consequences of their choices. The prince will gladly provide endless opportunities for pleasure and excess, but he takes no responsibility for helping his followers deal with addiction, social ostracism, or other problems that result from following his path too far. Sheogorath, the mad god. From the realm of hedonistic excess, we enter the most unpredictable and chaotic domain in all of Oblivion, the Shivering Isles, where Sheogorath reigns as the mad god, the prince of madness, and the cosmic embodiment of insanity in all its forms. No other Daedric prince challenges our understanding of reality, logic, and sanity as thoroughly as Sheogorath, whose very existence proves that chaos and creativity are often indistinguishable from each other. The story of Sheogorath cannot be separated from that of Jigalag, the Prince of Perfect Order, for they are two sides of the same cosmic entity, the ultimate expression of the universe's need for both structure and chaos. When the other Daedric princes cursed Jigalag for threatening their existence with his vision of perfect order, they transformed him into his exact opposite, creating a being whose every thought and action embodies the creative chaos that makes existence unpredictable and alive. Sheogorath appears as an impeccably dressed gentleman whose appearance shifts between two distinct aspects that reflect the dual nature of his realm. Sometimes he embodies mania, colorful, flamboyant, and filled with manic energy that sees possibility in every situation. Other times, he manifests as dementia, dark, paranoid, and obsessed with the hidden connections and conspiracies that lurk beneath the surface of apparent order. Both aspects share the same fundamental characteristic. They operate according to a logic that is internally consistent, but completely incomprehensible to minds that insist on conventional patterns of cause and effect. The prince's realm, the Shivering Isles, exist as a perfect expression of organized chaos, divided into two complementary regions that embody different aspects of madness. Mania bursts with impossible colors, fantastic architecture, and inhabitants who pursue their obsessions with joyful abandon, regardless of how bizarre or impractical those obsessions might appear to outsiders. Dementia shrouds itself in perpetual twilight, where paranoid creatures skulk through landscapes of twisted beauty, convinced that reality is a conspiracy designed to deceive and manipulate them. What makes Sheogorath unique among the Daedric Princes is his relationship with creativity and inspiration. While other princes represent various forms of power, knowledge, or influence, Sheogorath embodies the mental state that allows for genuine innovation and artistic breakthrough. The thin line between genius and madness finds its ultimate expression in the Mad God, who demonstrates that the most profound insights often come from minds willing to abandon conventional logic and explore possibilities that rational thought would immediately dismiss. The prince's approach to madness is far more sophisticated than simple random chaos or destructive insanity. Sheogorath understands that true madness follows its own internal logic, creating systems of thought and behavior that are perfectly consistent within their own framework, while appearing completely irrational to outside observers. This insight allows him to craft forms of insanity that are simultaneously liberating and imprisoning, offering his victims freedom from conventional constraints while trapping them within new patterns that may be even more limiting than what they escaped. The curse that transformed Jiggalag into Sheogorath created one of the most sophisticated forms of psychological torture ever devised. The Mad God retains memories of his original nature as the Prince of Perfect Order, but those memories are filtered through a consciousness that finds order repugnant and chaos delightful. This creates a constant internal tension where Sheogorath simultaneously yearns for and abhors the very thing he once was, leading to behaviors that are both self-destructive and creatively brilliant. The Grey March, the cyclical event where Jiggalag briefly reclaimed his true form and destroyed everything Sheogorath had created, represents the ultimate expression of this internal conflict. Every few thousand years, the Mad God would watch helplessly as his beloved chaos was systematically destroyed and replaced with crystalline order, only to have that order collapse back into madness when the curse reasserted itself. This cycle created a form of eternal damnation where neither aspect of the prince's nature could find lasting satisfaction. The breaking of this cycle through the intervention of the hero of Kvatch represents one of the most significant events in Daedric history, when the hero mantled the role of Sheogorath and successfully defended the realm against the Grey March. They disrupted the cosmic pattern that had contained Jiggalag's threat for millennia. The result was the permanent separation of the two aspects, with the original Jiggalag free to pursue his vision of perfect order, while a new Sheogorath continued to rule the Shivering Isles. Sheogorath's artifacts reflect his chaotic nature and his delight in subverting expectations. The Wabbajak, his most famous creation, appears as a simple staff but possesses the ability to randomly transform its targets into completely different forms. The weapon embodies the prince's philosophy that change is the only constant and that any attempt to predict or control outcomes is ultimately futile. However, the Wabbajak's effects are not truly random. They follow patterns that reflect Sheogorath's own twisted logic, revealing that even chaos can be creative when directed by sufficient intelligence and imagination. The staff of Sheogorath serves different purposes, depending on which aspect of the prince's nature is dominant at any given moment. In the hands of mania, it becomes a tool for inspiring wild creativity and breaking down barriers that prevent innovation. When dementia holds sway, it functions as an instrument for revealing hidden truths and exposing the conspiracies that supposedly control reality. Both functions demonstrate that madness can serve as a form of insight that penetrates illusions maintained by conventional thinking. The prince's worship among mortals tends to attract artists, inventors, and anyone whose work requires them to think outside conventional boundaries. However, Sheogorath's influence is not limited to obvious creatives. His touch can be found wherever someone abandons established patterns and explores new possibilities. regardless of whether that exploration leads to breakthrough or breakdown. The prince makes no distinction between productive and destructive forms of chaos, viewing both as equally valuable expressions of the creative force that prevents existence from becoming static. The festivals and rituals associated with Sheogorath's worship often involve the deliberate abandonment of logic and the celebration of absurdity for its own sake. These events serve multiple purposes. They provide outlets for the kind of creative expression that organized society typically suppresses. They offer temporary escape from the burdens of rational thought, and they demonstrate the liberating potential of madness to those who have never experienced genuine freedom from conventional constraints. What makes Sheogorath both fascinating and terrifying is his genuine belief that madness is a gift rather than an affliction. The prince sees conventional sanity as a form of self-imposed prison that prevents mortals from experiencing the full range of possibilities available to conscious beings. From his perspective, driving someone insane is an act of liberation that frees them from the limitations imposed by rational thought and social expectations. However, this liberation comes at a significant cost. While madness may free its victims from conventional constraints, it often imposes new limitations that can be even more restrictive than the original boundaries. A mad person may be free from social expectations, but they are also often incapable of forming meaningful relationships or accomplishing practical goals. Sheogorath's gifts frequently trap recipients in elaborate mental prisons disguised as infinite freedom. The prince's relationship with other Daedric princes is complicated by his unpredictable nature and his tendency to operate according to logic that his peers cannot anticipate or understand. Sheogorath's actions often serve multiple purposes simultaneously, advancing goals that may contradict each other, or achieving objectives that only become apparent in retrospect. This makes him both a valuable ally and a dangerous enemy, as he is capable of both brilliant strategic insights and completely self-destructive behaviors. Sheogorath's influence on the development of various forms of art, literature, and innovative thinking throughout Tamrielic history cannot be overstated. Many of the greatest creative breakthroughs in mortal civilization trace their origins back to moments of inspiration that bear the subtle mark of the mad god's influence. However, Sheogorath's contribution to culture is balanced by his role in various forms of destructive madness that have caused significant suffering throughout history. Vermina, the Dreamweaver. From the crystalline chaos of madness, we drift into the realm of nightmares and corrupted sleep, where Vermina weaves her web of terror through the dreams of mortals across Tamriel. Known as the Dreamweaver, the Lady of Nightmares, and the Prince of Psychological Torture, Vermina represents one of the most insidious and psychologically devastating forms of Daedric influence, the corruption of the sanctuary that sleep should provide and the transformation of dreams into instruments of torment. Vermina appears as a figure that shifts between beautiful and terrifying forms, often manifesting as whatever will cause the greatest psychological impact on the observer. Her appearance draws heavily from the fears and anxieties buried deep in the subconscious minds of those who encounter her, creating a personalized horror that speaks directly to each individual's deepest vulnerabilities. This chameleonic quality reflects the prince's intimate understanding of mortal psychology and her ability to craft experiences that penetrate the defensive mechanisms that protect conscious thought from overwhelming terror. The prince's realm, Quagmire, exists as a constantly shifting nightmare landscape where the laws of physics and logic operate according to dream rules rather than the stable patterns that govern waking reality. The realm serves as both a repository for the memories and dreams that Vermina has collected from mortals, and as a laboratory where she experiments with new forms of psychological manipulation. Visitors to Quagmire report that the landscape changes every few minutes. becoming increasingly horrifying as time passes, with each transformation designed to strip away another layer of psychological defense. What makes Vaermina particularly dangerous is her sphere of influence over memory and psychological experience. The prince doesn't simply create nightmares, she harvests the memories of mortals, leaving them with visions of horror and despair that gradually replace their authentic experiences. This process is so subtle that victims often don't realize they are being manipulated until their personalities have been fundamentally altered by the accumulated weight of false memories and artificial trauma. The prince's approach to psychological manipulation demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of how memory and identity interact. Vaermina recognizes that people are largely defined by their experiences and memories, so by controlling and altering those memories, she can fundamentally reshape who her victims are without them realizing that they are being changed. This makes her influence particularly insidious. Victims of Vaermina's attention often believe that their increasing despair and psychological deterioration are natural consequences of their life experiences rather than artificial impositions by an external force. The Skull of Corruption, Vaermina's most famous artifact, embodies her approach to psychological warfare. This staff feeds on the dreams of sleeping mortals, growing more powerful as it consumes more dream energy. However, the staff doesn't simply steal dreams, it replaces them with nightmares that serve Vaermina's purposes, creating a cycle where the artifact becomes stronger while its victims become increasingly psychologically damaged. The weapon demonstrates that in Vaermina's philosophy, power should be derived from the suffering of others rather than personal development or external resources. The prince's influence on the town of Dawnstar during the events of the Elder Scrolls V. Skyrim illustrates her typical approach to large-scale psychological manipulation. Rather than attacking the town directly or sending obvious minions to cause havoc, Vaermina simply prevented the residents from experiencing restful sleep, gradually wearing down their psychological defenses through chronic exhaustion and the accumulation of nightmare experiences. This subtle approach achieves devastating results while making it difficult for victims to identify the source of their suffering or organize effective resistance. Vaermina's worship among mortals tends to attract those who have been severely traumatized and who seek to transform their victimization into a source of power over others. The prince offers her followers the ability to inflict psychological suffering without leaving physical evidence, making them valuable assets for anyone who needs to break enemies without obvious violence. However, serving Vaermina requires followers to expose themselves repeatedly to the kind of psychological horror they seek to inflict on others, creating a selection process that ensures only the most damaged and desperate individuals become her long-term servants. The rituals associated with Vaermina's worship often involve the deliberate cultivation of nightmare experiences and the sharing of traumatic memories among participants. These ceremonies serve multiple purposes. They provide Vaermina with the dream energy she requires to maintain her power, they create bonds of shared suffering among her followers, and they gradually normalize psychological torture as an acceptable form of interaction. Participants in these rituals often report feeling simultaneously violated and empowered by the experience, reflecting Vaermina's ability to transform trauma into a source of dark satisfaction. What makes Vaermina particularly effective as a source of corruption is her understanding that most mortals are already carrying significant psychological wounds that can be exploited and expanded through careful manipulation. Rather than creating entirely new forms of suffering, the prince typically identifies existing fears, traumas, and insecurities, then amplifies them through repeated nightmare experiences until they dominate the victim's psychological landscape. The prince's relationship with other Daedric princes reflects her role as a psychological specialist whose skills complement the more obviously physical or magical powers wielded by her peers. Vaermina has been known to collaborate with princes like Molag Bal, providing psychological torture to soften victims before they are subjected to physical domination, or with Mythala, using nightmare-induced paranoia to destroy trust relationships that the web spinner seeks to manipulate. Vermina's influence on the development of various interrogation techniques, psychological warfare methods, and torture practices throughout Tamrielic history has been significant but deliberately obscured. The prince understands that her methods are most effective when their supernatural origin is not recognized, allowing victims and observers to believe that the psychological breakdown they witness is a natural result of stress or mental illness, rather than divine intervention. The prince's role in various historical conflicts often involves the strategic application of nightmare campaigns designed to weaken enemy morale and decision-making capacity. By preventing key leaders from obtaining restful sleep and filling their dreams with visions of defeat and disaster, Vermina can influence the outcome of wars without directly violating whatever cosmic compacts might restrict more obvious forms of intervention. The temples and shrines associated with Vermina's worship are typically designed to induce psychological discomfort and unease, rather than providing the sense of sanctuary normally associated with religious spaces. These locations often feature architectural elements that create subtle feelings of claustrophobia, paranoia, or vertigo, preparing visitors for the kind of psychological manipulation they will experience if they choose to serve the prince. The physical design of these spaces reflects Vermina's understanding that environment can be used as a tool for psychological conditioning. What makes Vermina ultimately terrifying is her patience and her willingness to invest decades in the gradual destruction of a single individual's psychological health. The prince understands that the most effective trauma is that which accumulates slowly over time, gradually eroding the victim's capacity for happiness and hope until they become incapable of imagining any existence other than suffering. This long-term approach allows Vermina to achieve devastating results while making it nearly impossible for her victims to identify when their corruption began or how it might be reversed. The cosmic balance. Understanding the prince's interconnected nature. As we near the end of our journey through the realms of Oblivion, it becomes essential to understand that the Daedric Princes do not exist in isolation from each other. Their seemingly chaotic conflicts and alliances actually form part of a larger cosmic system where each prince's sphere of influence serves to balance and check the others, creating a dynamic equilibrium that prevents any single force from achieving absolute dominion over existence. The relationship between opposing princes like Gigalag and Sheogorath demonstrates this principle most clearly. Order and chaos are not enemies, but complementary forces that define each other through contrast. Without the threat of Gigalag's perfect order, chaos would lose its meaning and become mere randomness. Without the creative disruption provided by Sheogorath's madness, order would calcify into stagnation and death. The curse that transformed one into the other represents not just a punishment, but a cosmic necessity that ensures both forces remain active and engaged. Similarly, the eternal conflict between princes like Molag Bal and Meridia serves essential functions in maintaining cosmic balance. Molag Bal's corruption and domination create the conditions that make Meridia's purification and liberation meaningful and necessary. Without darkness to contrast against, light becomes meaningless. Without oppression to rebel against, freedom loses its value. Their opposition generates the dynamic tension that drives moral evolution and prevents either pure evil or pure good from creating a static universe. The more subtle relationships between princes like Hermaeus Mora and Mythala reveal another layer of cosmic interconnection. Knowledge and secrets are not opposing forces, but different aspects of the same phenomenon. Hermaeus Mora accumulates information, while Mythala determines how that information flows through social networks. Together, they manage the cosmic ecosystem of knowledge, ensuring that important truths are preserved while preventing any individual or group from gaining access to information that would upset the fundamental balance of power. Even princes whose spheres seem completely unrelated actually serve complementary functions when viewed from a cosmic perspective. Sanguine's hedonistic chaos provides necessary relief from the burdens imposed by princes like Malakath, whose harsh lessons in strength through adversity could become unbearable without periodic escape into pleasure and revelry. Hircine's emphasis on fair competition and natural selection creates the conditions where Clavicus Vile's complex bargains become necessary tools for those who lack the strength to succeed through direct confrontation. The Cold Harbour Compact, the agreement between Sotha Sil and multiple Daedric princes that limits their direct intervention in mortal affairs, represents an acknowledgement of this cosmic balance by the princes themselves. Rather than viewing the compact as a limitation imposed upon them, many princes likely recognize it as a necessary mechanism for preventing any one of them from gaining advantages that would destabilize the entire system of relationships that governs Oblivion. The emergence of new princes or the fundamental change in existing ones creates ripple effects throughout this cosmic ecosystem. The separation of Jiggalag from Sheogorath, for example, has potentially created an imbalance that may require the emergence of new forms of chaos to compensate for Jiggalag's restored power, or new limitations on order to prevent the cosmic stagnation that originally led to his cursing. Understanding this interconnected nature helps explain why the Daedric Princes, despite their seemingly unlimited power within their own realms, rarely achieve permanent victories over their rivals. The cosmic system they exist within is self-correcting. Any prince who gains too much power or influence automatically triggers responses from other princes whose spheres provide natural countermeasures. This creates a form of cosmic democracy where no single vision of existence can permanently dominate the others. The role of mortals within this system is more significant than it might initially appear. Rather than being mere pawns or victims of Daedric influence, mortals serve as the primary mechanism through which the princes interact with and influence each other. A mortal who serves multiple princes simultaneously, or who plays princes against each other, is participating in the cosmic balance by ensuring that no single Daedric influence becomes overwhelming in their portion of reality. This perspective transforms our understanding of Daedric worship from simple religious practice into a form of cosmic citizenship, where mortals take active roles in maintaining the balance that keeps existence dynamic and alive. The apparent chaos and conflict that characterizes much of Tamrielic history can be understood as the natural result of cosmic forces working through mortal agents to maintain the equilibrium that prevents reality from crystallizing into permanent patterns. The artifacts and blessings that the princes bestow upon their mortal followers serve multiple functions within this system. On the surface, they appear to be rewards for service or tools for advancing the individual prince's agenda. However, they also function as monitoring devices that allow princes to observe how their influence interacts with that of their peers, and as balancing mechanisms that ensure no single form of power becomes too dominant in any particular region or time period. The mythology and religious traditions that surround the Daedric princes in various cultures reflect mortal understanding of this cosmic balance, even when that understanding is incomplete or distorted. The Dunmer concept of the good Daedra and the House of Troubles, for example, recognizes that the same cosmic forces can be beneficial or harmful, depending on how they are approached and integrated into society. The Nordic tradition of viewing some Daedra as testing spirits acknowledges their role in maintaining cosmic balance through challenge and conflict. As we conclude our exploration of the individual princes and their domains, it becomes clear that understanding any single Daedric prince requires understanding their relationships with all the others. They exist as part of a cosmic web where each thread supports and defines the others, creating a tapestry of existence that is far more complex and beautiful than any single pattern could achieve alone. The Daedric princes, In their eternal conflicts and temporary alliances, their moments of cooperation and cycles of opposition embody the fundamental truth that existence itself requires diversity, conflict, and change to remain vital and meaningful. They serve not as gods to be worshipped or demons to be feared, but as cosmic principles that ensure the universe remains a place where growth, challenge, and transformation are always possible. And so concludes our journey through the realms of Oblivion and the domains of the 16 Daedric Princes. We've explored the twilight wisdom of Azura, the revolutionary destruction of Mehrunes Dagon, the careful balance maintained by Periite, and the cosmic chaos embodied by Sheogorath. We've witnessed the predatory domination of Molag Bal, the subtle manipulation of Mephala, the ancient mysteries guarded by Nocturnal, and the hedonistic revelry celebrated by Sanguine. Each prince represents not just a supernatural entity to be feared or revered, but a fundamental aspect of existence that shapes the world through its influence on mortal hearts and minds. They are the forces that prevent reality from becoming static, that ensure every victory contains the seeds of future challenge, and that guarantee the universe remains a place where stories can unfold and legends can be born. The legacy of the Daedric Princes extends far beyond their individual actions to encompass their role as the guardians of cosmic balance and the preservers of dynamic existence. In their eternal dance of conflict and cooperation, they ensure that the universe remains a place where heroes can rise, where wisdom can be earned through struggle, and where every ending becomes the beginning of a new story. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of the Masters of Oblivion. If you enjoyed diving deep into the lore of the Elder Scrolls universe, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more content exploring the rich mythology and hidden secrets of Tamriel. Until next time, sweet dreams, fellow adventurers, and may your own paths through the realms of possibility be filled with wonder and discovery.